Introduction. Humph. Indeed, far inferior to me, Lu Luo declared with pride. When Ling inquired, when did you meet him? Why have you never mentioned him to me? Alas, do you think I desired to? I happened upon him by sheer accident. 8 years ago, at the Yin-Yang Palace of the Xiaoyao Sect. The Xiaoyao Sect stands as one of the most prominent sects in the Central Plains, with its leader always ranking high during the annual Huashan sword competition. The Yin-Yang Palace is located not far from the royal residence outside Chang'an, serving as the domain of the Xiaoyao Sect. What is intriguing about the Yin-Yang Palace is its orientation. The entrance faces the sun, while the rear door is shrouded in darkness. The living enter through the front, while the back remains sealed. This aligns with the principles of the Xiaoyao Sect. Chapter 1. Master of Bloodstone Island. Bloodstone Island is the largest isle located east of the Dorne's severed arm, contrasting sharply with the arid Dorne Desert. Here, the summer winds of the sea, once halted by the Greyjoy archipelago, transform into a warm breeze upon reaching Bloodstone Island. This land is rich in rainfall and boasts a humid atmosphere, making it the most pleasant isle among the Stony Isles. Yet, the ravages of perpetual warfare have severely scarred its vegetation, leaving traces of dragon fire, even after centuries. With the arrival of Euron Greyjoy, the enslaved workers he brought began to cultivate the land, while his fleet returned with seeds and wives for the laborers. The enslaved were obliged to serve and fight for him, with the lands they tilled promised as rewards. Today, Bloodstone Island resembles a military camp and a vast construction site, having given rise to a large port city on its southeastern coast, known as Bloodaxe City. True to its name, it resembles a colossal double-edged axe, with the handle serving as the fleet's anchorage. The western blade accommodates residences and barracks, while the eastern blade comprises the trade district and the dwellings of captains. At the end of the thoroughfare extending along the axe handle stands the fortress of the newly ascendant pirate king, the giant Euron, a bastion of dark crimson reminiscent of a sea monster. It is said that he constructed it using a mixture of ironstone and the flesh and blood of his enemies. On this day, several ships from the Iron Islands, a harsh and impoverished land, were anchored at the harbor. They did not linger long, arriving at dawn. They weighed anchor before the sun had set. The fleet brought enslaved workers, ironstone, and quality seeds, all laden with the arms of Coer and the exquisite wines of the Three Daughters. We fare well here, why should we go mad alongside Balon? Colin detests us, he aspires to knighthood, and his sons are no better fools, madmen, cowards, and wastrels. The speaker was one of Euron's brothers, known to many as the Brooding Crow, Lord of Seagulls, the Watcher, and more. He served as Euron's lieutenant, captain of the ship All-Seeing Eye, and the spiritual leader of the fleet. All our fortunes stem from plunder, such is the impression held by those women of the Greenlands. They would sooner cede this archipelago to those 3 harlots than allow us to rule. Brother, Noen's voice boomed as mightily as his stature, with many of the laboring farmers from the Westlands asserting that he surpassed even the fabled Ser Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain. Then let us obliterate their fleet, set their ports ablaze. The laborers yearn for wives, and our islands remain far from populated. The fortresses of the Greyjoy Isles and the lands of the torture pits require our toil. Barto Greyjoy's voice was akin to a windbag, having suffered a throat wound during battle that cast him into the sea. He had yanked the arrow from his neck with brutal force and charged once more at the enemy upon being dragged ashore by his shape-shifting companion. He was Noen's most valorous captain and brother, the master of the ship Iron Tax Collector, known for his fiery temper and relentless charge into battle. But what a threat from Tyrosh! They are amassing a fleet at Myr, and the Slaver's Bay has been restless of late. Lady Cerelia was the mother of Noen, Barto, and Crolon, a salt wife to their father, a wild woman and an exceptional shapeshifter. Together with Crolon, she managed Noen's intricate web of intelligence. She appeared to be no older than 40, with weathered skin, pronounced cheekbones, and fiery red hair, framing her finely featured face, still radiant despite bearing 3 sons and enduring the caress of ice and sea winds for years. Her childhood in the arid lands and subsequent life at sea had endowed her with a robust physique, rendering it hard to believe that the resource-scarce wilderness could produce such a statuesque figure. She stood nearly as tall as Crolon, the shortest of the trio, who himself was a towering and formidable Ironborn warrior. Though Crolon was renowned for his intellect, none could deny his martial prowess among the surviving Ironborn. Even Barto would hesitate to challenge him in a contest of finger dancing, save for Noen. Crolon remains at Bloodstone, I'll mother, and Barto shall accompany me to Old Wyk. The chaos of Westeros and its displaced populace will serve as our treasury and barracks. Balon Greyjoy, the current Lord of the Iron Islands, summoned the Ironborn captains to Old Wyk to prepare for once again donning the driftwood crown, 6 years after the stag claimed the Iron Throne. He dispatched his brother, the Ironborn envoy Victorian Greyjoy, to Bloodstone Isle to rally his cousin for the ceremony of his coronation. No one scoffed at this notion, yet he recognized the necessity of the Ironborn, the demand for a larger fleet, and the urgent need to neutralize the threat posed by the Greenland's fleet, which Noen had seized during the War of Usurpers. 6 years had passed, and despite levying scant taxes, the great lords to the west remained hostile, while the Iron Throne conferred upon him only the title of Count. Stannis was amassing his forces, eager to claim a share of the spoils from Noen's domain. Recently, the royal fleet had even docked at Greenstone Castle for patrols, with King's Landing asserting it was to safeguard shipping lanes. Noen understood their vigilance, for the Ironborn were notorious marauders, thieves of the Seven Kingdoms, much like the very actions he was currently undertaking. Plundering the former kingdom of the Three Daughters and the slave ships of Slaver's Bay, the laborers on the Isle of Hua were of a different mind. They even referred to Noen as their liberator. I shall leave Velemir and Kagan behind. Corin, be vigilant for ships approaching from the north. I shall return as swiftly as possible by then. The fleet may indulge in a grand feast of venison. The shapeshifters serve as the eyes and messengers of the Norn fleet, and it is precisely the strategic use of these shapeshifters that renders the Narrow Sea fleet nearly invincible, as they consistently anticipate the movements of their foes and even launch surprise attacks under the cover of night. Chapter 2. The Iron Fleet of the Narrow Sea. Norn perceives himself as a compassionate and benevolent individual, yet the harsh realities of life have compelled him to become the person he is today. Colin Greyjoy, a naive fool, abolished the ancient customs spoken of by the Ironborn, yet few adhered to them. It was during this tumultuous period that the three brothers were born. Their father, having never taken a wife, saw the institution of salt wives abolished at Colin's behest. As a Greyjoy residing in Pike, Clithiana became his sole companion. Hailing from beyond the wall, she retained many customs of the free folk, which led to her frequent beatings. That man cherished wine and bloodshed more than his own children, who, in turn, harbored no love for him. Dagon Greyjoy was the name bestowed upon Norn at his arrival into this world. Clithiana often lamented the northern winds and snows, and Norn, her firstborn, was named in honor of her past identity. She whispered this name to him repeatedly. Upon discovering this, Norn's father suffocated her shape-shifting companion, a beautiful snow raven, which drove Clithiana nearly to madness. From Clithiana, Norn acquired many skills of shapeshifters. He secretly imparted these arts to his two brothers and found a new companion for Clithiana, an owl she named Yana. Clithiana frequently declared Norn to be the most gifted shapeshifter she had ever encountered. Had he been taught by her mentor, he would have been immensely powerful. Eventually, Norn met the shapeshifter known as Kagan, though by that time, Kagan's abilities were no longer sufficient to serve as Norn's teacher. Thus, Norn, Bardo, and Corin grew amidst concealment and violence until Norn matured into a formidable warrior. He led his mother away from Pike to settle in the vicinity of Sealskin Point on Great Wyk. The man, in a fit of rage, swung his sword at Norn, only to be effortlessly subdued by him. Following this, Norn sailed with the Fawn family on raids, gradually ascending to the rank of captain. Norn's robust physique and exceptional martial prowess earned him many privileges from the Fawn family, whose library contained a wealth of unique knowledge. Though the Fawn family had nearly lost their shape-shifting talents, their archives preserved extensive training techniques for shape-shifting, allowing Norn and his brothers to thrive in their new environment. After Norn's father's death, the Lord of Fawn at Lonely Light even pursued Clithiana. Shapeshifters were not shunned within this family, and she was granted a longship, which Norn named the Lady Clithiana. The Fawn family ultimately did not achieve their desires, yet Noen and Bardo wed the daughters of the Earl of Sealskin and the Lord of Lonely Light, vowing to arrange future unions among their progeny to restore the shape-shifting gift to the Fawn bloodline. This state of affairs persisted for several years, until the demise of King Corlin and Noen's father at Shield Islands. Noen acquired his weaponry and longships, complemented by his own vessel, thus assembling a fleet of 13 longships to voyage northward. Upon enlisting a sufficient number of freemen and shapeshifters at Frostbite's Tooth, they returned to the Iron Islands in hopes of recruiting more captains and Ironborn warriors. Barons scorned them as the bastards of wildlings, the sons of salt wives, for Cliriana had never performed the rockwife ceremony with that man. Noen did not contest Baron status, yet he possessed the rights inherent to an Ironborn, bolstered by the support of the Fawn and Cobble families. Subsequently, Noen severed 3 fingers from Crow's eye in a finger dance game and triumphed over numerous captains, compelling Baron to acquiesce to Noen's proposal to raid southward alone and permitting them to recruit willing sailors and warriors. The Ironborn relished resolving disputes through finger dancing, much like the knights of Westeros cherished duels. Legend has it that they even determined the rightful king of the Iron Islands in this manner. The Salt sons and younger sons heeded Noen's call, ultimately forming a modest fleet of over 60 longships, laden with Ironborn and thralls, while Victarion derided Noen, asserting he was not raiding but begging. Crow's Eye proclaimed he would recover Noen's corpse when his ship sank, mounting his head upon his flagship. Ultimately, the malevolent kinslayer was left disheartened. Corlin claimed to have witnessed Euron poisoning his half-brother, persistently referring to him thus. At that time, residing in Pike, Corlin transformed into a mouse, professing knowledge of all the castle's secrets, which fueled his profound disdain for Corlin's sons. With the aid of the shapeshifters, Noen led his fleet in a midnight assault on the port of Lys, seizing half of Lys's fleet while incinerating the remainder. In subsequent voyages, Noen's fleet triumphed in every encounter, their eyes surveying the skies, and seized the drowned men of the fleet had once questioned Noen's faith, yet Corlin endured longer than any amongst the crew, thus earning his position as their leader. Ultimately, victory yielded greater wealth, and the Ironborn would follow a captain capable of leading them to triumph indeed. All men were thus inclined. When Noen captured Bloodstone Isle, he commanded a grand fleet of 200 longships, while the fleets of Lys and Tyrosh lay either obliterated or plundered. Noen ruled the Stoneshade Isles for nearly 5 years, with his people fully aware of their shapeshifters' identities. After all, the fleet and territories under his command relied on their sharing of intelligence and communication of orders. This world is vast, yet intimate merchants of Westeros, and the distant shores trembled at the aberrations of Bloodstone Isle, much as they had once quaked at the legacy of the Dragon King. The greater the power of Norn, the more uneasy they become. An uncontrollable and undefeated pirate admiral represents a hidden threat to all. Thus far, they have not united, and Norn will ensure that they do not. Norn requires allies, yet apart from the Ironborn, no one favors brigands. Therefore, Norn will set sail towards the long-forgotten archipelagos. The strength of the Ironborn is feeble, much like the fragile coalition of Westeros. Norn seeks a chaotic Westeros. As for the merchants of the trading city-states, those who wage war with an abacus will never truly unite. After all, business is not shameful. Norn is acutely aware of these truths. Chapter 3. Old Wyk Island. The briny sea breeze tormented Cirianna's nostrils as she reminisced about her youth spent amidst these islands, a period fraught with anguish. Yet she found solace in having raised 3 children. The gentle morning light illuminated the deck of the Salt Mistress, where Noen and his brother gazed quietly at the shallows beneath the Naga Hills. The Stonehouse family, the Drum family, and the ancient Gobbler family of Shatterstone had already raised their banners. The longship from Lonely Lantern Fortress had also arrived. Bardis was the first to leap ashore, hastening towards Count Gilbert, whose wife, Laenala Farwin, had recently gifted him with a pair of twins. Laenala was the daughter of Count Gilbert, Gales Farwin. Spitting out a morsel of some shellfish he had been chewing, opened his arms and approached Bardis. Bardis swore he saw white shells among the remnants Gales had discarded. The Farwin family remained as frigid and unyielding as ever. They embraced and exchanged greetings, with Gales remarking, "By the gods, Baron, he has summoned all the great lords of the Iron Islands, and he has finally realized he is unfit for that position. After a millennium, are we to hold a king's council once more?" Bardis erupted into laughter. What is old Farwin prepared as a gift to sway enough captains to vote? Sealskins alone will not suffice. After sharing a hearty laugh, they made their way towards Gilbert. Gilbert was lean and clad in a neat suit of iron gray plate armor. The 2 branches of the Farwin family had grown affluent through their son-in-law, unlike in times past when they could scarcely assemble a full suit of armor, always piecing together mismatched rings of iron. "How is Laenala?" "The letters I received only described the appearance of the children," Gilbert inquired, his concern for his daughter evident. "Laenala is a fine woman, father-in-law, with an ample supply of milk. The twins are thriving," Bardis responded loudly. "I have yet to see Lord Tristan. Have they not arrived?" "Lord Tristan's ship is docked at Drum's castle. He seems to be in conversation with Lord Dunstan. They should be on the mountain by now," answered Gales, who was casually draping an arm over Bardis' shoulder. "Once the Baroness Council concludes, I shall take Gisela and Gilbert to Bloodstone Island. He ought to meet his rocky bride." Gales had what a shapeshifter of the free folk, fulfilling the Farwin family's long-held desire. "By the drowned gods, How has that wild boar grown so large? Noen exclaimed, riding alongside his shape-shifting companion. The boar, with a grunt, leapt over the ship's edge and, after a few bounds, had already reached Bardis and Gales. This creature had grown to an impressive size, larger than its kin, its face adorned with tough bony plates. Noen had even affixed a shield tailored to fit its visage, complete with iron swords resembling horns, with 4 prominent tusks, each encased in iron. Noen had also crafted a heavy suit of iron armor for it. When it charged, it resembled a war chariot. Thus far, Noen had encountered no opponent on land that could instill fear in his formidable companion, for it had once trampled a hero from the trading city-state of the Elephantine soldiers. Perhaps it is my frequent indulgence in feeding it meat, alongside various training and feeding methods from the fawn family. I have gathered an assortment of herbs. And when Gales arrives at Bloodstone Island, I shall provide him with the formula, including the cultivation techniques and seeds for the herbs. How delightful! Gales seemed poised to add more, but was interrupted by Count Gilbert, who urged him to proceed, remarking that we must be the last to arrive, and Baron must be eagerly awaiting us. The men ascended the hill in close formation, exchanging updates on their lives and discussing the latest endeavors of Baron. Celiana did not follow. Aside from Fawn and her 3 sons, the other lords harbored a disdain for her. Before long, they reached the Naga Hill, where the skeletal remains of the sea dragon loomed around the Grey Sea King's hall like grand columns. At the heart of this assembly, Baron Greyjoy sat upon the throne, awaiting the audience of lords from various realms. This was Noren's inaugural visit to Naga Hill. Legend had it that the first king's election took place here, and generations of Ironborn thereafter had chosen their leaders through voting. Of course, bribery was considered a testament to one's prowess among the Ironborn. Without wealth, one could scarcely claim kingship over the Iron Islands. However, it had been a considerable time since the Iron Islands last convened a king's election, and Noren pondered that perhaps the moment had come to do so again. Lost in thought, the quartet stepped onto the long corridor of the Grey Sea King's hall. While it was referred to as a hall, it was, in truth, an open-air platform. It was said that during the reign of the Grey Sea King, treasures adorned the bones of the Naga, yet, upon his death, his numerous sons seized those riches in their quest for power. Now, the hall was bereft of splendor, save for the skeletal columns and a massive stone chair that resembled a boulder nestled within the Naga's jaws. As Noren entered the corridor of bones, all eyes turned in astonishment towards him, provoking a restless reaction from the creature, which tossed its head as though ready to bolt. Baron sat regally upon the immense stone chair, the Naga's jagged teeth resembling a crown above him. To his right stood Victarion Greyjoy, captain of the Iron Victory, alongside his brother Euron Greyjoy, captain of the Stormbreaker. To his left was the one-eyed crow, Oren Greyjoy, who, despite his blindfold, possessed a gaze that was said to perceive storms. Baron's adult sons stood poised on the stone steps of the throne. The lords, accompanied by their adult offspring or alone, took their places beneath the ribs of the Naga, seated in familial clusters. Noren and Bardis approached Lord Tristan Fawn. The time for conversation was not yet ripe, and after a brief exchange of greetings, they found a spot to sit and awaited the commencement of the proceedings. A resounding horn echoed from the depths of the skeletal grove, heralding a call to arms for the Ironborn, who would be preparing for a boarding battle upon hearing its sound. From the shadows emerged Tal, a drowned man, cradling a crown crafted from weathered wood, reputed to be the fabled driftwood crown, said to have been passed down from the Grey Sea King. Noren harbored doubts, suspecting it was merely a piece of driftwood whittled into shape. Tal stood resolutely beneath the throne, raising the crown above his head. The ancient path had long since abandoned the Ironborn, and the verdant lands had forgotten the splendor of their lineage. Now, the great dragon had perished, and the feeble stag yearned for our submission, yet he bore no dragon. Thus he spoke. Balon rose, and Noen could perceive his agitation, reminiscent of Noen's own fervor during his first transformation. His tightly clenched fists trembled incessantly. Were it not for the gravity of the occasion, Noen might have suspected him of a tremor affliction. Chapter 4. Today, I shall be crowned king. My Ironborn, descendants of the Grey Sea Kings. The drowned god has bestowed upon us iron and fire, granting us the license to ravage, pillage, and torment, as we forge a new world through blood, flame, and jubilant song. Balon's voice was hoarse, nearly a shout. The great dragon had stripped us of our glory and traditions. And now that usurper of the Iron Throne sought to compel my fealty. His hammer, an instrument fit only for repairing hulls, rendered him worthy only of servitude beneath me. We have ravaged the verdant lands, slaying countless nobles and kings, their daughters becoming our salt wives. From this day forth, they shall continue to be our prey. The dead do not perish. Balon's thunderous roar reverberated across the vast Naga hills, akin to a storm at sea. The leaders and captains below responded with equal fervor. The dead do not perish. They shall rise again, with even greater ferocity. The Iron Islands are a land of cruelty, barren and strewn with rocks, mountainous and exceedingly steep, with scarce mineral resources. The scarcity of trees hampers metallurgy, necessitating that the few available be crafted into longships, not by nature's design, but rather from overpopulation. The Ironborn must rely on plunder to sustain the surplus populace or consume them in warfare, in pursuit of martial valor. The drowned god has thus become the predominant faith of the Ironborn. After all, death merely signifies a return to the embrace of the drowned god. Those Ironborn who fall in battle are cast into the sea, where it is believed they are welcomed into the watery palace, becoming his oarsmen. Indulging in endless feasts and copious wine, surrounded by gold and attended by fair maidens. Amidst this fervent atmosphere, servants began distributing fine wine and treasures. Rewards for the captains embarking on their voyages, akin to the gifts presented by candidates at a kingship election. Balon, too, must offer gifts in his quest for the crown. For one without wealth or power cannot ascend as king of the Iron Islands. The Ironborn fight not for glory, but for pragmatic gain. At this moment, Tommen ascended the throne, addressing the corridor. Balon Greyjoy, son of Quellan Greyjoy, his lineage is indisputable, his achievements evident to all, and his wealth unparalleled across the islands. He shall be crowned here and shall embark from this place, returning with riches, provisions, timber, and salt wives. He is undeniably drenched in the essence of the drowned god. His blessings have long been bestowed upon him, and glory shall be wrought from iron and fire. Who then would dare to question his authority? A profound silence enveloped the gathering as the Greyjoy family had reigned over the Iron Islands for many years, their power and wealth seemingly unassailable. Naturally, there were no objections to Balon's coronation. Whether duke or king, as long as he could lead the Ironborn to victory, he would be regarded as a worthy leader. Tywin placed the driftwood crown upon Balon's head, then removed a waterskin from his waist, pouring its briny contents over the crown, symbolizing the union of the drowned god and the Grey King. Thus, Balon was formally crowned as the king of the Iron Islands. At this moment, Balon could be addressed as the Great King. The Ironborn, however, would never truly pledge their allegiance to anyone. They acquired all they possessed through strength and might. Since Aegon's conquest, nobles who gained notoriety or caught the attention of the Dragon King were bestowed titles such as Earl, while those of lesser renown continued to be referred to simply as leaders. Castles perched upon mountains were known as the Kings of the Rock, while those whose territories lay close to the sea were dubbed the Kings of Salt. Even a mere captain of a longship might claim the title of King of Salt. The King of the Iron Islands, the King of Kings, was both the King of the Rock and the King of Salt. The arrival of Aegon Targaryen had indeed transformed the Iron Islands, albeit not significantly. Balon's coronation marked the first since Aegon's conquest. Though the Greyjoys had once held a great king, they had never dared to crown one. Their authority derived from decrees stamped with the Dragon King's seal, and the Ironborn were merely called such due to their deeds. Had the Dragon King still been present, the Ironborn would have remained in the shadows, venturing south to Essos or Sithorios to spin their iron coin. Yet the Dragon King had long departed, and the nearby temptations had left the Ironborn yearning. Next came the time for raiding and pillaging. The first step was to identify the initial target and the commander of the fleet. Norn understood he must take the initiative, for his foundational support was a vital hub. Once an offensive was launched, the Iron Throne would receive word, and his fleet would confront the Iron Throne's first assault. The Stone Step Isles were situated at a critical juncture, lying along the route to White Harbor, Seagull Town, and the Royal Fleet, necessitating a swift resolution to the threat on the western coast before he could return to his stronghold. Norn gently patted the ear of his snorting companion and strode boldly to the center of the hall, declaring, "The only threats on the western coast are the Golden Fleet and Redwine's wine merchant vessels. We should strike at them first. Then, while the Iron Throne remains unresponsive, we shall head south, laying ambush for the Royal Fleet at my Bloodstone Island or launching a proactive assault. Thus, the maritime threats to Westeros will be eradicated, and we shall pillage freely across that land. I have brought 200 longships, and Bloodstone Island possesses even more. I have been engaged in warfare for years, gaining ample experience, and I have never known defeat. I can lead the fleet to bring true victory for the King of the Isles and the Drowned God." The previously boisterous hall gradually fell silent as all eyes turned to Norn, awaiting the next speaker. It was Victarion who could no longer contain himself. "There is but one commander of the Iron Fleet, aside from the Great King. Only he has the authority to command the fleet. Are you challenging the authority of the fleet commander, Norn Greyjoy? You are not even one of the Ironborn. He is nothing but a wild-born miscreant. He does not believe in the Drowned God, a heretic, a monster, much like Balon, who shows blatant disrespect towards the divine. The raucous hall erupted once more. Many gazes filled with envy towards the wealth amassed by the Balon family and the Noons in recent years. Devout followers of the drowned god despised their shapeshifter identity. And even those unaware of the full truth mistakenly believed that shapeshifters transformed into animals rather than controlled them, referring to them as such. Bardo, more volatile than his brother, surged into the chaotic crowd, seizing the loudest instigator and flinging him down at Noon's feet. Kill this bastard. The unfortunate soul just hurled was a member of the Winch family, Walton Winch. His father immediately raised his fist towards Bardo, yet, in a moment of reason, refrained from drawing his sword. Come on, you tongue-wagging coward. Bardo bellowed, tearing off his robe to reveal his scarred, robust physique. Bardo seized the rushing Winch leader, whose height barely reached his chest, and with ease, lifted him, tossing him like a coal into the throng, toppling many in his wake. Die. More surged towards Bardo, while Noon, arms crossed, watched calmly. Bardo swung left and right, each punch resonating with a dull thud. Finish him. Pull his beard. Tug his hair. Grab him. Kick his legs. In an instant, Bardo's considerable frame was besieged, with many attempting to topple the stout man. Bardo fought back, twisting and turning, seizing the shoulders of the one who had a grip on his neck, Gimmon portly, spinning him like a top. Like a bull, Bardo broke free from his captors. And Noon noticed a patch of his beard missing. Bardo dashed about, employing both fists and feet in a dance of chaos, exhibiting agility that belied his size. Those unfortunate enough to fall into his grasp met the same fate as Winch and Portly, and soon the ground was littered with individuals nursing swollen cheeks and bloody noses. At this moment, someone drew a sword, and Noon fixed his gaze upon them, silently grasping the massive axe on his back, while hum-hummed, sensing his master's mood. Approaching with a playful gait. Enough. Balon glared at the farce, while Crow's eyes sparkled with intrigue. The hall fell silent once more, save for the pained moans of the injured and murmurs of the crowd. Balon fixed his stare on Noon, declaring, I have appointed the commander of the Iron Fleet, my brother Victarion, and you are to obey my command, Dagon Greyjoy. Please, address me as Noon, your grace. Corin often referred to Balon as a fool in front of his brothers. His intellect was not in question, but his stubborn and competitive nature made it difficult for him to heed sound advice. He consistently relied on brute force to command others, a trait Noon particularly detested. Balon seemed poised to continue, but Noon anticipated yet another diatribe steeped in ancient customs and Ironborn traditions. I must admit, I find merit in Noon's discourse. At this moment, Yuluen spoke softly, his voice gentle and crisp, akin to a whisper in one's ear, compelling attention with every word he uttered. An ambush could only be executed once, thereafter. Those on the shore would surely be on high alert. Given that there were now 2 targets and our fleet was sufficiently numerous, it would be prudent to split our forces, thereby completely neutralizing the threat on the western shore. I can lead one contingent, and I shall offer you, my lord, half of the spoils I acquire, but I demand subsequent support for the Stone Stair Islands or permission to conscript Ironborn from the archipelago. Noen's voice echoed in the ears of all present, while Bardo had silenced the dissonant murmurs. Gazing at the towering Noen, none doubted his ability to overpower everyone in attendance, not to mention the heavily armed wild boar by his side. The beast's shoulder stood at the height of Noen's brow, rendering it a formidable creature among the Iron Islands and most of Westeros. The Stone Stair Islands also belong to the Ironborn. I am their king, and I have no reason to relinquish that territory, Barrow declared emphatically. Furthermore, I pledge to bestow gifts upon every captain who comes to our aid. My spoils will be at the king's discretion first. Noen, too, was generous, as all were aware that families close to him, such as the Fawns, the Gloverys, and the Sparrows, had prospered immensely in recent years. Captains raiding to the south were well received there, no longer needing to endure arduous journeys back to the Iron Islands for supplies. Once again, the strength of this branch of the Greyjoy family was assessed, and no dissent was raised. The ensuing discussions would revolve around the allocation of the fleet and the targets of their offensive. Several allied families rallied behind Noen, and King Barrow designated 100 longships to his command, led by the Yellow Rain of Island Greyjoy, who would assault Lannisport. Subsequently, Barrow's longships would return laden with iron coin, while Noen would journey south to join Victarion in attacking the fleet at Redwine, ambushing the other Riverland fleets that sought to render assistance. Victarion would then return to the Iron Islands, allocating some longships to Noen, who would head straight for the Stone Stair Islands, seeking opportunities to devastate vessels along the eastern coast. Chapter 5. Dawn at Lannisport. The night in Lannisport was far from dark. It was the largest city in the Westerlands and the epicenter of trade, particularly renowned for its exquisite gold jewelry, celebrated for its imaginative designs and masterful craftsmanship, which captivated wealthy lords and merchants alike. The flourishing commerce inevitably spurred the growth of the service industry, and even the torrential rain that commenced at sunset failed to dampen the spirits of revelers. They simply embraced the tempest, indulging until dawn. Melodious strings mingled with the boisterous cheers of patrons, echoing through the city's expanse. While patrolling soldiers of the watch could only huddle beneath the eaves of buildings, trudging slowly in an attempt to keep their heavy armor dry. Though it seemed a futile endeavor. 7 hells, when will this accursed rain cease? My limbs are nearly frozen. How might I venture to Flower Street for women after the shift? Lamented one soldier of the watch. Silence, Ryan, the captain snapped, irritation evident in his voice. You've been chattering all the way. Just beyond this street lies the outpost, where you can roast that thing of yours. The captain felt the oppressive dampness of his sticky undergarments, the cold iron armor pressing uncomfortably against his skin. Ryan's incessant prattling showed no signs of abating. If you ask me, he ought to sever it and share it with those unfortunate children to fill their bellies. At that moment, a soldier at the back boldly expressed his thoughts, eliciting laughter from the rest of the squad. Even the captain found his discomfort somewhat alleviated. Enough. Let us hasten through this wretched stretch of road. I long to change into dry clothing at the outpost and enjoy a good night's sleep. The patrol fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the relentless downpour hammering against the buildings and the clanking of their iron armor. Compared to the comrades patrolling through the stormy night, the sentinels in the watchtower undoubtedly fared better. Yet, the violent sea winds still swept raindroplets through the observation windows, forcing the soldiers to retreat from the openings, tightly wrapping themselves in their cloaks and leaning against the walls to shield themselves from the elements. The thunder cracked like a drumbeat in the ears of the sleepless, while the sentinels within the tower could only mutter indistinctly, grumbling against the howling storm outside. Following closely was a silver serpent, slicing through the heavens, its menacing presence proclaiming its unassailable authority. The sky, the earth, and the sea were rendered vividly clear beneath the radiance and heat it emitted, a testament to its unmatched might. In the distance, the colossal warships shimmered in the waters off Lannisport, the golden sea monster emblem adorning their sails bearing a greeting from the long-standing enmity of House Lannister. Leading the charge was the flagship of Norn, the Saltwar's son, flanked by the Bonehand and Dunstan's flagship, as well as the Sealskinner, the flagship of Norn's father-in-law, Trystane. Closely following was the Hammerstrike, the flagship of Goeth Kublai. Under the illustrious glow of the Silver Serpent, an increasing number of longships came into view, the Yellow Rain, the Iron Tax Collector, and the Lady Celestia, all emerging as if to fill the outer seas of Lannisport. Cloaked by the torrential rain, the prosperous town remained blissfully unaware of the impending calamity, even as the Saltwar's son had docked. The Golden Fleet and merchant vessels harbored no warnings from the sailors remaining aboard. Such weather was ill-suited for navigation. Vessels always approached the shore cautiously to secure supplies or evade storms, with land visible from the ships, and vice versa, with the keen eyes of the shapeshifters. The fleet from the Iron Islands remained beyond the side of the western shore. Harrow, Fair Isle, and the City of Celebration were oblivious to the vast fleet, failing to send a single word to their lord. The clamor of battle erupted in the harbor, unprepared sailors being violently dragged from the holds. Those who resisted had their throats slit, while surrendering men were swiftly bound. The Ironborn were the finest sailors, and their binding skills were equally commendable, allowing them to seize the harbor's anchorage and tax office with ease. The anguished cries of the sentinel echoed sharply through the torrential downpour. As the soldiers atop the bell tower curiously gazed downward, a keen arrow pierced through the helmet's crevice, penetrating the eye and skull with deadly precision. The sight of their comrade, rigid and toppling backward with the arrow lodged grotesquely in his face, sent tremors through the remaining soldiers. The fletching quivered as if resentful for not having penetrated the back of his skull, persistently probing for its mark. One soldier shouted in alarm and dashed towards the bronze bell, desperately attempting to pull the pendulum's tether. He succeeded partially, but a flying axe whirled violently, striking his back. Despite the Lannisters' considerable wealth and the well-trained, well-equipped garrison of Lannisport, not every soldier donned full armor. The chainmail that offered protection against close-range stabbings failed to shield him from the axe's onslaught. The weapon embedded itself deeply into his body, his grip slackening as he leaned forward, plummeting into the vast hall designated for announcements. He would not be alone. The lethargy of the downpour today would forever bind him in memory with his fallen comrades. Goad and Dunstan exchanged glances that sparkled with exhilaration. They had never anticipated such a seamless assault. Not a single ship had sunk, nor a single life lost, as Lannister soldiers and sailors were slaughtered like lambs. Capturing the port was as effortless as breathing. Norn left his father-in-law to guard the harbor, planning to take enough ships upon their retreat and incinerate those they could not carry away. Tristan was tasked with providing necessary cover for the vessels in the port, lest Casterly Rock detect any irregularities in the area. The exuberant boar, who had followed his master since his piglet days, now trotted beneath him. Having transitioned from being cradled in arms to being ridden, half of its life had been spent charging alongside its master, evolving from a mere shadow into a formidable vanguard. Dunstan, Goad, each of you lead a shield formation to seize the walls on either side. I shall charge directly into the town hall and armory. Once the threat of force within the city is neutralized, we will proceed to plunder. The two leaders, overflowing with excitement, offered no dissent to Norn's command, promptly assembling their troops and setting forth. The tumult of roars and screams spread from the harbor into the urban expanse, and the revelers and slumberers alike finally sensed the disturbance. No tempest, however fierce, could muffle the desperate cries or the clattering of armor. People flung open their rain-sheltering doors and windows, peering toward the source of the commotion. Battles erupted along the lengthy streets where fierce and menacing ironclad warriors, perhaps ill-suited for the chaotic clash of large formations in the wild, found themselves all too familiar with the brutal bloodshed of close-quarters combat in narrow alleys. Years of skirmishes and cramped shipholds had made such encounters second nature for these marauders. Armed with short axes and round shields, they charged with wild cries toward the unprepared city garrison. The defenders, armor askew and steps disordered, were mostly rudely awakened from the warmth of their beds by the cacophony of chaos or their commander's furious bellowing. They had little time to fully prepare before confronting the sudden onslaught of their adversaries. Although the Ironborn thrive on plunder, they are not mere undisciplined brigands or marauders. The distribution of spoils and the movement of their formations are governed by strict regulations. Typically, they allocate rewards based on rank and the number of crew members aboard. Absent explicit orders, no one is permitted to leave the ranks independently, and possession of concealed loot incurs severe penalties, including expulsion from the ship. Those barred from boarding are regarded as no better than slaves. Ensuring the enforcement of these rules are the priests of the drowned gods, who accompany the fleet during their raids. While they seldom engage in combat, the Ironborn hold them in high esteem. The advance of the Ironborn is rapid and lethal. Before the defenders of a city can react, they, guided by the shapeshifters, swiftly locate and neutralize the armed forces within. Their objectives are clear, and their actions swift. Battles often unfold in the environments they know best. Organized resistance crumbles quickly under the raids of Norn and Hum. They bypass the lively establishments along the roadside, as the occupants therein pose no significant threat. However, the timid souls hiding in civilian dwellings are utterly exposed beneath the watchful eyes of the skies, and soon, Ironborn squads will drag them out to become corpses in the alleys. Those brave enough to draw their swords and partake in this grim game will receive special consideration. Ill-equipped warriors, armed with mere rudimentary tools rather than true weapons, will find themselves untouched by the Ironborn. Instead, they will be met with precise flying axes and arrows, dying without worth, yet their courage shall be commended. Should this be Norn's city, he would elevate such individuals afterward. The arsenal and town hall respond with remarkable alacrity. Elite soldiers swiftly organize a defense, forming a disciplined line at the end of the long street, but to little avail. Hum's ruthless charge easily rends apart the freshly assembled shield wall, and the Ironborn swarm from all directions, prying apart the shields. Close quarters combat ensues. Soldiers are compelled to discard their long spears to draw their sidearms, yet the cramped conditions hinder the use of lengthy blades. The Ironborn's short axes face no such obstacle. Their strikes resound against the helmets and fragile joints of their foes. The battle concludes swiftly, and by dawn, the once bustling Lannisport is left with only scattered resistance. The wails and cries gradually envelop the city, drowning out its former vibrancy. As the Ironborn commence their use of iron coins. Chapter 6. I must relieve myself in the Hall of Heroes after a night of torrential rain. The first rays of sunlight greet the morning. The night's carnage has invigorated the Ironborn, yet Norn still commands a rotation of rest, for a fierce battle lies ahead. And he has no intention of concluding matters thus. A clear, resounding call echoes across the plaza of the town hall as Yana flutters her wings and lands upon Hum's large head, her iron beak and claws still bearing the unmistakable stains of blood. With a joyful demeanor, the creature pranced about, excitedly recounting its recent triumph in battle to its dear friend. Meanwhile, Yana, weary from a night of conflict, squinted her eyes in fatigue, visibly displeased by the creature's rambunctiousness. She spread her wings and squawked, pecking at the creature's iron visage, producing a series of resounding thuds. The graceful Yana ambled towards Noan, her expression tinged with a subtle sorrow and anger. Noan swallowed the morsel of meat he had been chewing. In this harsh land, where cruel people are nurtured, the Ironborn thrive. Plunder is an indispensable sustenance in their lives. I cannot impose the same restrictions upon them as I do upon the subjects of Bloodstone Island, mother. I am aware that the years of comfort have dulled my memory of our bloody past, leaving me somewhat unaccustomed. However, I shall adapt. My son, do the northern winds and snows still weigh upon your mind? Have the crows been intercepted? No one did not respond directly to Yana, who often fretted over the children. Despite the ample servants within the castle of Bloodstone Island, each year, she diligently prepared new garments for the three brothers. Having even taken the time to learn the embroidery techniques of Westeros and Essos, despite it not being her forte, Yana was a capable girl, and our preparations were thorough. There was no reason for the birds in the crow's nest to survive, and those who fled the city were intercepted. The news should not have leaked. Noan nodded in satisfaction. The heavy rain concealed the battle from the previous night, extinguishing the scattered fires. Castle Rock should still be unprepared. Indeed, it is a fortuitous day. Barto has already commenced his operations. The Iron Tax Collector and the Yellow Rainstorm will lie in wait in the unseen corners of Castle Rock, ready to infiltrate the harbor when the front lines grow tense. We shall feign an attack at the forefront to provide him with the opportunity to breach the inner sanctum of Castle Rock. After a brief respite, the captains and leaders gathered in the square, directing the Ironborn to transport their plunder onto their longships. A sense of satisfaction permeated the air. The wealth of Lannisport dazzled these country folk, who had never seen such riches. The true daughters of the city ignited a fervent desire within them to take more salt wives. What shall we do next, Noan? I can hardly wait to savor those delicate, golden-haired maidens, Gales remarked, a man with few scruples, whose definition of maidens was not necessarily limited to women. Ensure the duties are arranged and take a good rest. Do you not think our spoils are still insufficient? There are vast amounts of gold within Castle Rock, and it is said their provisions could sustain them for a lifetime. Tristan furrowed his brow. You intend to assault Castle Rock? It is too formidable. Our numbers are many. Yet we must reserve some to guard the harbor and the city. Our forces for the siege are limited, and the Ironborn are not adept at breaching fortified strongholds. Dunstan interjected, a man of reckless abandon. What is there to fear? I have never engaged in such a smoothly executed battle. This group, which only knows how to mine for gold, has proven to be far less formidable than I had anticipated. Their claims of invincibility are mere bluster. I am determined to relieve myself in the Hall of Heroes. Bah! The Ironborn have always regarded farming and mining as menial tasks. The islanders employ slave labor for their cultivation and extraction, while the Iron Islands yield iron ore and the Lannisters harvest gold. Perhaps those who mine for gold consider themselves superior to those who toil for iron, yet all of it remains the work of slaves. I have not seen Bartis. You must have arranged everything from the very beginning. This is my first experience in such a conflict, and I am willing to follow you, Norin. Gorith Goobler is somewhat exhilarated. His sons are still underage, yet the Earl of Goobler has brought the most longships on this occasion, with several of his cousins accompanying him. Norin shared his strategy, and the Ironborn are well-versed in naval warfare, with many having spent their entire lives at sea. I have heard that some are so accustomed to the ocean that they feel out of place on land, offering little in terms of strategic insights regarding terrestrial tactics. When Ironborn step foot on land outside their islands, they typically have a singular purpose. After hearing Norin's plan, the others merely expressed sentiments of realization and surprise at the possibilities presented. However, Norin overlooked a critical issue, the proximity of Casterly Rock to Lannisport. Even the most careful concealment would be difficult to maintain, especially considering the golden-haired inhabitants, usually abundant in the city, are conspicuously absent from the watchtowers today. At this moment, in Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister sits upon the throne once held by the former king of Casterly. There must be some trouble at Lannisport, however. No ravens or messengers have brought forth any news. The watchtower indicates a notable increase in ships at the port compared to yesterday. Tywin relayed the information he had just received to his most trusted aide, Kevin. No one challenges the lion without cause, save for the detestable squids. Though they have lowered their sails, I can still detect the stench of decay wafting over the city walls. I have every reason to believe that the Ironborn have launched an assault against us. Tywin is politically astute, having served as the prime minister under the late Targaryen dynasty, during which the realm flourished. However, his methods are often unpopular, and even the king harbors reservations towards him. Yet, after his heir chose to remain a lifelong bachelor and eschew lands, he departed from King's Landing in indignation. What would you have me do, brother? Kevin never proposes suggestions before Tywin, as he believes this to be the utmost support and affection for his elder sibling. He diligently executes each of Tywin's commands without questioning their righteousness. I shall send a raven to King's Landing. Given the current circumstances, even if we can defeat the Ironborn, we cannot safeguard the fleet at Lannisport. They have not wrought widespread destruction. Rather, it appears they covet Casterly Rock. The night raid last evening has emboldened them. They seek to replicate their success in Casterly Rock. The Ironborn style of combat bears resemblance to that of the swineherd from Bloodstone Island, adept in nocturnal skirmishes and ambushes. I have heard that they once attempted to seize disputed lands but were vanquished in open battle by the mercenaries of Myr and Tyrosh. Apart from the Golden Fleet, the Lannisters also possess golden cavalry and golden infantry. The Lannisters adhere to their debts, and the Squidmen must remain wary of a potential counterattack from within the city, which will undoubtedly hinder their ability to muster a significant force. Kevin, I implore you to assess their mettle. Do not attempt to besiege the city. Merely issue a challenge from outside its walls. Should they be arrogant enough to venture forth for an open battle, let them come to understand the pride of House Lannister. Kevin had executed Tywin's commands countless times before. In this instance would be no different. He would meticulously carry out Tywin's orders. His movements were swift, or rather, Tywin's preparations were expeditious. Before calling upon his aides, he had already dispatched orders for assembly to the barracks and stables. Upon his arrival, Kevin selected the troops that were ready and set forth. Unbeknownst to both Kevin and Tywin, as the Lannister forces stepped out of the barracks, still within the lion's mouth, Norrin had already received word. Although the plan was to launch a nighttime assault, he had learned throughout the years the importance of contingency plans, always placing his faith in the wisdom of others. Yana, who detested the daylight, still took flight from her master's lair, drawn by the allure of his culinary creations, seeking her other little master to convey the secrets she had preserved in her mind. Chapter 7. Delivering a profound lesson. The midday sun cast a golden blanket over the earth, a hue reminiscent of Lannister colors, Kevin mused. Gregor Clegane trailed closely behind him, accompanied by his band of ruffians. Tywin's knights had set out early from the city to rally his most loyal hound, and they encountered one another on the road from Casterly Rock to Lannisport. Kevin's march was not swift. Although he yearned to launch a surprise attack akin to the Squidmen's assault on Lannisport, he dutifully obeyed his brother's commands, as he always had. He trusted that his brother had his reasons, though he had yet to comprehend them, for his brother's capabilities were beyond his reach. It was not until Kevin laid eyes upon the shield wall established by Norrin in the fields leading to Lannisport that realization struck him. Everything had indeed been anticipated by his brother. Observing the swineherd before the opposing shield wall, he noted that he was indeed mounted upon a pig, just as the tales had described. Adorned with a full-faced sea monster helmet, the grotesque tentacles of the squid rose ominously, obscuring his features, while his armor appeared remarkably heavy. As for the wild boar, by the seven hells, he had never encountered one of such size. Its meat must be exquisite, he mused, noting the iron plates on its body. It must have engaged in considerable exertion to possess such muscularity. Sweet-tongued Laugh remarked that if Gregor was a fierce hound bred by Tywin, then Laugh was a purebred cur. In truth, every soldier under Gregor's command bore a similar disposition. The pig would not suspect that its flesh was already coveted by another. Though it had feasted on many meats, it had never tasted human flesh, for it had always fought with the horns and fangs bestowed by its master, who forbade it from tearing into foes. The location chosen by Norrin is splendid, situated on a gentle slope at the confluence of Lannisport, Casterly Rock, and Craggorn Castle. The fertile plains outside Casterly Rock are adorned with rich farmland and sparse trees. Atop the highest peak stands the Lannister stronghold, Casterly Rock. In this towering place, trees are equally absent, yet the entire mountain is cloaked in lush, verdant grasses, which blanket the ground even beneath Norrin's feet. He recognizes these grasses as brambles. It is indeed a land of immense wealth. Not only the castle but the entirety of this plain resembles a colossal gold mine. The richest deposits are found at the peak where Casterly Rock is perched, overlooking the entire golden expanse below, rendering most of the terrain devoid of ambush potential. Norrin has no intention of lying in wait. Rather, he brazenly sets his forces in position, awaiting the Lannister army. His sole rationale for this location is that the gentle slope bestows a psychological advantage upon the enemy, allowing them to feel superior and fully exploit the cavalry's strengths, positioning their formation sufficiently close for a charge that could thrust him into the heart of their ranks. The slope is two-sided. The face towards Casterly Rock and Craggorn Castle is short and steep, while the side facing Lannisport is long and gradual, thanks to the eyes of his shape-shifting companion. The sky remains a realm of clarity, reminiscent of the times when the Dragon King still roamed, perhaps gazing down upon the earth in similar fashion. Norrin harbors no desire to enter the body of his shape-shifting ally. Instead, he prefers to forge a spiritual connection akin to that between a dragon and its king, commanding them with spoken word. The beast exhales excitedly, its forelegs prancing with eager anticipation, the armor covering its body clinking and rattling. Its broad faceplate obscures its vision of the approaching foe, but that is of little consequence, for its master serves as its eyes. His brother speaks the truth. This pig herder is utterly oblivious to the principles of open warfare. Gregor, impart upon him a profound lesson. This may well be the final lesson of his life. The Lannister formations have been established. cavalry at the forefront, archers behind, and spear and shield soldiers poised as a final reserve to clear the battlefield. Sir Gregor brandishes his colossal sword and charges down the slope, the ruffians trailing behind him, neglecting their lances. Believing that the flimsy shield wall would collapse under a single assault, they prefer the thrill of cleaving with sword and blade. With a fierce snort, the beast begins its charge, advancing like a whirlwind, lowering its head as its sharp horns glimmer with a blinding sheen in the sunlight. While its four massive tusks add to its fearsome visage, Sir Gregor's eyes gleam with cruelty, raising his great sword high above his head, intent on cleaving Norn in two. Never doubting his ability to do so, in the depths of Noen's eyes, there exists neither sorrow nor joy. The emotions of his companion are incapable of swaying him. Cologne often asserts that Noen will prove to be the most formidable adversary one encounters upon the battlefield. Unlike Barda, who is quick to anger, Noen remains perpetually composed. Even after vanquishing numerous foes, one cannot discern any emotion beyond indifference within his gaze. Once he sets his sights on a target, he neither revels in victory nor cedes in defeat. Only once all is settled can one glimpse a trace of relief upon his stern visage. As Hing galloped faster, the undulating saddle caused Noen to sway back and forth, reminiscent of a rocking horse crafted for a child. In his left hand, Noen wielded a long-handled warhammer, while in his right, he grasped a hefty battle-axe. Leaning forward with arms outstretched, he seemed to grant wings to Hing. The distance between them and their adversary diminished, and Noen could envision the cruel expression adorning the grotesque head beneath the barrel-shaped helmet. He swore that this would be the largest head he had ever severed. Noen tightened his legs, securing his feet in the stirrups fastened to Hing's armored shoulders. Exerting strength as he assumed a forward stance upon his companion's back, perhaps aptly termed a pig stirrup, given that Hing was indeed a wild boar. Noen's movements did not escape Hing's keen perception. Years of partnership had forged an unbreakable bond, their synchronicity allowing them to communicate without words. In this moment, man and beast were as one, truly embodying a harmonious unity. Jump! Noen's thunderous command resonated like a clap of thunder. He bent his left arm across his chest while raising his right arm high. Sir Gregor's fierce battle cry matched his fervor, as the two strongest warriors in the Seven Kingdoms prepared to collide. The leaping boar mitigated the disadvantage of the terrain, with Hing's lowered head aimed squarely at the steed's skull. The impact of their swift charge drove his sharp horns through the horse's iron armor, producing a resounding thud. The companion of the shapeshifter emerged victorious in this clash, before the horse could even emit a whinny. Its legs buckled in submission, yearning to kneel. The knight atop the steed rose to his feet, wielding his massive sword in a vertical strike, while the ferocious beast swung its left hand, causing the clash of sword and hammer to resonate with the distinct sound of metal on metal. Sir Gregor swung his right arm back. His weapon was designed for slashing, yet his strength was too dispersed. The collision with the war hammer left a dent, and even a deformation in his blade. He swiftly raised his shield, encased in iron, to brace against the impending strike of the battle-axe. Hing's facial armor clung tightly to its cranial bones. Its adversary had already perished, succumbing in the very moment of impact as the sharp horns pierced its skull. In a fit of rage, Hing tossed its head, as if to say, "Release my horn, you lifeless wretch." If Hing could speak, one would surely hear such words. The shifting of the mount caused Sir Gregor's actions to falter. In an instant, his body leaned forward, and before he could fully raise his shield to stabilize against the horse's head, he sought to regain his balance. The fierce shriek of the battle-axe slicing through the air echoed in his ears as Noen ruthlessly brought down the weapon. The sound of immense force scraping against the shield resonated first. His tilted body was not entirely shielded, and the axe merely grazed the side of the shield before swiftly traversing it, confronting Sir Gregor directly. The dual-headed axe kissed Sir Gregor's neck as tenderly as a lover. Surprisingly, Sir Gregor did not suffer greatly. The axe, sharp and heavy, instantaneously cleaved through the iron collar of the knight's armor, relentlessly carving through the breastplate from his right shoulder down to his abdomen. The deformed metal canister compressed inward, finally halting the axe's further penetration. Fortuitously, Sir Gregor was not severed in two. He retained his whole body, which was of considerable importance to Noen. With a grunt, he finally shook off his adversary. The thrown steed knocked down a knight and tripped several others who were unable to pivot in time. However, Noen's battle-axe became ensnared in the knight's body. The weighty armor was too formidable, and the contorted sections clung tightly to the protruding parts of the axe. The deceased knight expressed his dissatisfaction in this manner, as if to say, "Your mount has triumphed." Indifferent to such matters, Noen charged forward, carrying the knight's lifeless form as if wielding two hammers, one grand and exaggerated, the other small yet fierce. He was grateful to the merciful Sir Gregor. The knight's substantial physique and heavy armor had shielded him from much harm. Chapter 8. No winds charged the blackbirds carried tidings of darkness. The scholar of Cayenne City received a task early that morning, to feed the ravens. Delivering news of the Ironborn rebellion and the assault on Cayenne City to King's Landing and the castles of the west. Once satiated, the birds took flight. Their cries echoing as they soared from the high tower of the rookery, each one carrying a message. The scholar gazed at the birds he had nurtured, watching them dance like sprites in the sky. Soon they would disperse, each heading to different destinations. How loyal these birds are, the scholar mused. Yana despised the sun. Yet the mistress had provided her with so much that she felt somewhat dazed. After all, daytime was her time to rest. She observed the foolish, hefty creature below, whose coarse fur made for a truly comfortable nest, far more so than old white soft fur, which always clung to her and required vigorous wing flapping to shake off. Storm. The irritable distant relative accompanied her on the left. He was the mainstay for the day. The other distant relatives kept their distance. Yet Yana and the glutton were unafraid of him. They now obeyed me. Yana, queen of the bird flock. Old White was a snow bear, one of Bart's shape-shifting companions, while Storm was a golden eagle, one of Noin's shape-shifting partners. Yana possessed an intelligence comparable to that of a 10-year-old child, able to comprehend numerous spoken words without the need for the shape-shifting link to Quiliana. Currently, she was the cleverest among Noin's shape-shifting group. The birds that leave the crow's nest only fall prey to arrows, and they have only ever been struck down by such projectiles. Rarely do they become the target of predation, for they are not defenseless creatures. They often travel in flocks. Unless confronted by a swarm of raptors, they remain unperturbed, as those who can contend with predators possess their own pride and disdain to share their hunting grounds. Regrettably, what they faced today was not mere hunting, but a meticulously orchestrated massacre. Yana's resonant calls echoed through the skies, while the aerial assailants chose their targets with precision. The ravens had anticipated arrows approaching from below but were unprepared for foes descending from above. Iron talons and sharp beaks descended upon the unsuspecting ravens, and one by one they plummeted, leaving no hope for messages to reach Cayenne City. Yana did not partake in the assault. She soared amidst the clouds, vigilantly observing her domain, relishing the thought that not a single bird could escape her hunting ground. Tywin had long noticed the Ironborn departing the city, yet he chose not to inform his brother, arrogantly believing he could easily vanquish the marauders on land. When Norn arrayed his shield wall, Tywin even felt a chuckle rising within him. But years of restraint and the gravitas of the king of Cayenne prevented him from displaying such frivolous sentiment, though the corners of his mouth betrayed a hint of amusement. His diminutive son, however, did not share his father's reservations. Tyrion laughed heartily and critiqued the Ironborn's myriad blunders on the battlefield, always eager to showcase his wit, especially in the presence of his father. Those who cannot don armor to fight are unqualified to judge a warrior, Tywin concluded abruptly, silencing Tyrion's performance. There is nothing more to behold, and my affairs demand my attention. You may continue to watch their antics, which is preferable to getting drunk in a whore's embrace. With that, Tywin departed the tower and returned to his throne room. Following Tywin's exit, Tyrion also lost interest and left the proud Lannister, the haughty Lannister. The foolish Lannister, had they lingered a moment longer, they would have witnessed the surprise Norn had prepared for their cavalry. The clash of cavalry concluded swiftly, and the once fortunate Sir Gregor was no longer blessed. Under Norn's powerful blows, the upper and lower Gregor were finally severed from one another. The upper half comprised the left shoulder, head, left chest, and left arm, while the lower half consisted of the right shoulder, right chest, legs, and right arm. As Norn passed by a nameless knight, he used Sir Gregor's momentum against him, causing the knight to topple under the force of impact. Sir Gregor, too, departed from Norn, his helmet having vanished, revealing his grotesque head. His lower body, propelled by Norn's colossal strength, struck a knight's face, instantly snapping the knight's neck and sending him crashing to the ground. The upper half of the knight landed upon the hindquarters of a warhorse, which had just met its demise at the hands of Norn's mace, resulting in a grotesque spectacle as the body's natural functions ensued in death. If Kellen were to behold his corpse, he would undoubtedly refer to Sir Gregor as Sir Gregor Clegane, who perished amidst filth and excrement. This reflection was uttered by Norn while surveying the battlefield. Amory Lorch felt a sense of relief at his distance from the monstrous figure. He glanced back to witness the phalanx of spears shattered by the swinehood's charge, leaving behind a grim tableau of fallen steeds and knights in the wake of the wild boar. Fortuitously, the two factions were sufficiently close, allowing the cavalry to swiftly advance upon the Ironborn shield wall. Some knights, paralyzed by fear instigated by Norn, regained their confidence as they beheld the Ironborn slacken formation, raising their swords and shields in a bid to redeem their recent disgrace. Gales Farwin displayed a cruel smile at the approaching Lannister cavalry, then bellowed at the Ironborn, "Pull." The shallowly buried stakes tilted upright under the Ironborn's exertion. Their tips, sharpened to a lethal point, were trodden upon by the first rank of Ironborn, who stood upon a crossbeam that hindered the stakes from rising further, thus forming a rudimentary yet effective barricade. The cavalry had no time to halt. Some audacious souls pressed forward, while the timid pulled desperately at their reins to evade the wooden impediments. Yet, the ignorant riders behind them were thrust forward into the stakes, becoming mere corpses. The rear cavalry, realizing the truth too late, followed their companions into the fray, hoping their formidable iron armor would shield them. Some stakes splintered under the impact, while others seemed to shrink, their sharpened ends striking like hammers, either breaking apart or embedding themselves deeper into the earth, becoming more firmly entrenched. The cavalry descended into chaos before the unexpected barricade. Some were thrown from their mounts due to the abrupt halt, landing amidst the Ironborn shield wall. With their fates all but sealed, those who managed to stop clung tightly to their horses, striving to coax them into motion once more. The Ironborn, however, offered them no reprieve. They surged forth from behind the barricade, brandishing hand axes toward the cavalry. Each Ironborn, having practiced their dexterity with these weapons, showcased varying degrees of skill, but all were adept throwers. The Ironborn favored axes, long-handled, short, hand axes, hammer axes, and double-headed axes. They understood the nuances of each axe's application: hand axes for throwing and precision tasks, short axes for close-quarters combat, long-handled axes for foot battles. While the heavier hammer axes and double-headed axes were seldom employed as primary weapons, now was the moment for the long-handled axe. Chapter 9. The profound lesson of Kevin cavalry stripped of speed were but lambs awaiting slaughter. The Ironborn raised their long-handled axes to ensnare the mounted knights or to cleave the legs of their steeds. The fallen knights, akin to tin cans, struggled to rise. But the razor-sharp axe blades swiftly descended upon their throats, or the curved hooks of the axes pierced through the joints of their armor, dragging them in torment for the Ironborn's amusement. No one possesses a greater understanding of can opening than the Ironborn. Whether it be a gnarled old tree, a locked ship's hold, or the tightly shut door of a dwelling, they can breach these barriers with nothing but the axes in their hands, as if traversing an uninhabited realm. A Drickdrum unceremoniously dragged a stout knight from his warhorse, effortlessly severing his head with the double-headed axe he wielded, before mounting the knight's steed and charging forth. The stoic Adric was first introduced alongside Dunstan Drum at the Royal Selection Assembly. I envisioned him as a collateral member of House Drum, the uncle to Dennis and Donner Drum. Most notably, their father, Jim and Drum, the progenitor of Dunstan, fathered 100 sons, making it plausible that Adric is indeed one of his offspring. The Ironborn have long relied on ships for transport rather than horses. While they may falter at the tournaments in Westeros, their skills in cavalry charges are certainly comparable to those of the knights from the Green Lands. Dennis and Donner Drum, witnessing their uncle's actions, began to imitate him, and more Ironborn joined the chaotic equestrian contest. Norn's charge continued unabated, his bobbing head flinging saliva in all directions as he exhaled. Should one peel back his mask, they would find a visage imbued with excitement and joy, reveling in the intimate interaction with his master. The Lannister formation was in disarray, the crossbowmen in the front row, who were supposed to unleash a rain of arrows once their cavalry breached the enemy lines, found their plans disrupted by Norn's sudden emergence from the ranks of the archers. Who could have anticipated that someone could breach the cavalry's array alone? At this juncture, the cavalry had yet to reach the Ironborn's formation, leaving the crossbowmen in a state of indecision, whether to shoot or withhold their fire. As Norn's charge drew ever closer, some of the spearmen, under the command of junior officers, attempted to cross the archers' ranks to establish a shield wall in Norn's path, further exacerbating the chaos among the frontline crossbowmen, who, in a moment of urgency, shouted for their comrades to draw their bows. The sparse arrows posed little threat to Norn. His double-headed axe served as a shield, deflecting the incoming projectiles. Norn's iron visage easily brushed aside the fallen feathers, leaving only minor dents and white scratches on their iron armor without inflicting further harm. The formation, initially positioned too closely, could no longer muster a second volley of arrows, and Norn leapt once more before the throng. His abdomen, obscured by the skirt of his armor, revealed segments of glimmering iron resembling lobster shells, each piece polished to a brilliant shine. The blades raised by the spearmen could only futilely strike sparks against this formidable surface. Norn descended heavily into the crowd, immediately snapping the necks of the unfortunate souls beneath him. The fortunate, however, did not enjoy their luck for long, as a whirlwind of hammers and iron axes followed swiftly in his wake. Norn swayed his head, his tusks finally finding purpose amidst the throng, where the congested formation allowed them to unleash their devastating power. The most crucial task has not been forgotten, and its relentless charge continues unabated. The foes standing in its path are either hurled into the air or trampled beneath a tremendous force, while the master shields it from lateral harm. Witnessing the one man and his beast, formidable like a demon, the onlookers are paralyzed with fear, contemplating the monstrosity and malevolence before them. The closest military formation has collapsed, with those within desperate to escape, yearning to distance themselves from these two terrors, while those outside strive to enter, still unaware of the horror that awaits. Kayvon's voice, hoarse from issuing commands, attempts to reorganize the troops, yet chaos cannot be quelled in an instant. Panic gradually spreads, while the relentless advance persists. Observing Kayvon, who remains dutifully directing the army's formations, Noen cleaves through the oncoming pikes, calculating the approximate distance between them. Noen has underestimated Lannister. He can distinctly perceive the strain on Harren, as the ranks of Lannister's warriors, though currently incapable of inflicting substantial damage, still impede Huging's momentum with their dense array. Tearing pain radiates from Noen's left leg and lower abdomen. The concentrated pikes have failed to penetrate his heavy armor. Yet some spearheads have found their way into the crevices of his defensive gear, sapping his strength, albeit not lethally. As Kayvon Lannister draws nearer, Noen valiantly swings his weapon, carving a path to victory for both Hung and himself. Closer, closer, Noen thinks to himself. Adelric, among the Ironborn, is a rare warrior, donning armor salvaged from the arsenal of Lannisport, with his left hand gripping the reins and wielding an oak shield wrapped in iron. Emblazoned with the emblem of the drum skeletal hand, he relentlessly strikes the flanks of his steed with a double-headed axe. Unimpeded, the knights soon plunge into the enemy ranks, scattering archers who fail to retreat in time, before their steeds crash into the freshly erected shield wall. The armored horses break several pikes, yet their charge comes to an abrupt halt. The steeds collapse amidst the shattered shield wall, and their riders are catapulted forward by sheer inertia. Adelric curls behind the narrow confines of his oak shield, the quality armor from Lannisport protecting the exposed parts of his body as he plunges into the fray. Rolling, Adelric raises his round shield, half reclined upon the ground, vigorously swinging his battle axe. The Lannister soldiers, unaccustomed to such training, find their legs severed by the keen blades, howling in agony as they writhe on the ground. The Ironborn, in turn, laugh boisterously, mimicking Adelric's combat style, fully exploiting their advantage in close-quarters engagement. Kayvon maneuvers his steed forward, as Noen transforms what could have been an easily won battle into a stalemate. His guards dismount, drawing their swords to join the tumultuous melee. Kayvon strives to maintain the clarity of command, issuing orders loudly from atop his mount. The piercing sound of slicing air is drowned out by the officers' shouts and the roars of battle. A spinning throwing axe arcs gracefully from the chaos of combat, its perfect trajectory unappreciated, save for the gaze of its thrower and the astonishment of its victim, attesting to its worth. Die. Noon's roar pierced through the tumultuous battlefield, as the double-headed axe traversed swiftly across rows of soldiers. The officers, belatedly aware, turned their gaze towards the striking white steed. Yet the knight atop it had vanished from sight. A bone-chilling dread enveloped them, causing their bodies to tremble. Kaifeng's squire fled desperately towards the white horse. No, for a fleeting moment, the squire was engulfed in confusion, yet he understood that sorrow was not an option at this juncture. He dared not withdraw the massive axe that had pierced through his back. Instead, he lifted the bloodied Sir Kaifeng, striving to mount the steed and deliver the grim tidings of his brother to Duke Tywin. Kaifeng had learned his lesson, a lesson so profound that it marked the final one of his existence. The brief yet fierce battle beneath the walls of Cayenne City concluded the instant Kaifeng fell from his horse. The officers, now devoid of the will to command the desperate fight, rushed towards their steeds, sounding the retreat. The soldiers, still grappling with the Ironborn, looked back at their commanding officers, only to see the dust of retreating steeds, which was met with the swift strike of iron axes aimed at their faces. Heng finally ascended the hillside it had long yearned for, pausing to observe from its elevated position, despite its poor eyesight and the iron shield obscuring its view. It relished the posture. Sensing the scent of horses ahead, it felt an eager anticipation, prompting Noon to gently stroke the exposed skin of Hung's neck at the saddle's front. Adelic limped over to Hung, his leg injured in battle but fortunately not severely, a far better fate than those who had perished. He still had the opportunity to accrue further merits, securing a commendable position in the Hall of Drowned Gods. Increasing numbers of leaders and captains ascended the gentle slope, observing the scattered and disheveled retreat of the Lannisters, erupting into hearty laughter, whether for the fervor of battle or the thrill of victory. Dunstan could hardly contain himself. Although this was not the Hall of Heroes of Cayenne City, it was indeed a battlefield of valor. He promptly unfastened his cumbersome armor, laughing heartily as he unleashed a torrent of taunts at the fleeing knights, a delightful tremor coursing through him. His antics inspired others to join in, and Henking's participation further intensified the atmosphere. Noon, too, dismounted in mirth to partake in the revelry, while even the usually stoic Adalic formally engaged in this man's game, presenting a truly spectacular scene. Chapter 10. The fortress Noon gazed from afar at the sole pathway leading to Cayenne City, the Lion's Mouth. Only when standing before it does one comprehend why Cayenne City is impervious to siege. The gold-mining lunatics had nearly hollowed out the entire mountain, and the only route upward, aside from the city gates carved from the mountain's recesses, was a steep incline riddled with jagged rocks. Defensive towers adorned the slopes, and in the absence of dragons, a direct assault could only be met with the futile sacrifice of lives. It is said that Visenya believed that even dragons could not breach this fortress, while Noen contended that this was merely because the then king of Casterly Rock, Loren Lannister, was frightened into submission by the flames of fury, kneeling before Aegon Targaryen. The subsequent Lannisters, in their quest for self-aggrandizement, concocted such tales. The truth is, even with just one dragon, be it a young sea smoke or Vagor, Noen would possess at least 9 methods to breach this tortoise shell. Not to mention that Aegon Targaryen's Black Dread was the mightiest dragon even during the Blood and Fire era. This cursed place is truly exalted. I have heard that Tywin's chamber pot is fashioned from gold. I must sit upon it to ascertain whether it truly yields gold. If so, I could do nothing but sit upon old Wyk Island and still become the wealthiest Ironborn. Dunstan's remarks elicited laughter, as the confidence buoyed by last night's raid and the recently concluded battle united everyone in belief that the fall of Casterly Rock was but a fleeting moment away. They would accomplish what had never been achieved before, and their names would be immortalized in history, even when they reached the Water Gardens. They could boast over their predecessors who had besieged Casterly Rock. Perhaps those ancestors, who had met their demise here, would even concede their positions to this great conqueror of Casterly Rock. We have already lost the advantage. The Lannisters are not fools, and they will be wary of our night raids. Moreover, this castle is far too lofty. The equipment aboard our ships is of little use. Even if we were to commence crafting now, we could not besiege them for long. Once Victorian reaches the Greenstone Isle, the news will leak, and we cannot stand against the entirety of the Westerlands. Besides, the surrounding nobility will invariably be in league with the Lannisters, and the circumstances here cannot remain concealed for long. Adric is not merely a warrior. His calm judgment attests to his understanding of the art of war, which transcends the traditional methods of the Ironborn. No one could not help but regard this somewhat unfamiliar warrior with newfound respect. Perhaps the Ironborn have been cowed by dragons. Few leaders among them possess a long-term vision. Since the downfall of House Heir, they have been preoccupied with the so-called old ways. No one is acutely aware that pillage and slaughter cannot secure dominion. Only compromise and sharing can unite the people. However, he need not ponder further at this moment. Although he is a Greyjoy, the seat of power is already claimed by another. Moreover, Noen is well versed in the wisdom of amassing resources before claiming kingship. Now is the time for the Greyjoy main branch to shine, and he merely needs to seize the territory that rightfully belongs to him afterward. The disputed lands present a fine opportunity. The kingdom of the 3 daughters has long since faded, although there are signs of revival under his suppression in recent years. Swift action could indeed allow him to glean rewards from the flames. One must attempt to satisfy their ambitions. We have achieved such a magnificent victory. Now every sailor is silently sharpening his axe, yearning for more. Lannisport is affluent, but not sufficiently so. The gold within that castle could fill every longship we possess. Stopping now would bring no joy to anyone. The speaker is the leader of the Crow's Nest, Gwyne Gobbler, along with Goda Gobbler and Tristan Faywin, the father-in-law of the noble Norn, as well as Lady Ciliana, stationed in Lannisport, vigilant against any disturbances within the city. Having been discovered, Norn no longer intends to show mercy. Aside from the Ironborn who have ventured out to battle, the city will be thoroughly plundered and cleansed. Should the siege of Casterly Rock fail, he will order the ignition of every structure within the city, taking with him all its wealth, including its populace. In an effort to completely diminish the Lannisters' capacity for war, we shall establish our camp here and seek parley, to first confront the proud lions. If we can persuade them to send us some gold before the siege begins, it would certainly motivate our sailors, Norn stated as he organized the subsequent arrangements. The leaders, increasingly convinced by Norn through their days of navigation and combat, began preparations, first erecting a more fortified encampment, then crafting a battering ram capable of breaching the gates, presenting an appearance of readiness for siege. Tywin had never been so quiet. Although he was always serious and composed, he was not a man of few words. Since the corpse of Kevin was returned to Casterly Rock, apart from ordering the execution of Kevin's attendants, he had remained in the Hall of Heroes, gazing at the shattered armor of his deceased younger brother, alongside the valiant ancestors of the Lannister clan. Jaina Lannister was perhaps the last surviving sister of Tywin. Aside from the missing Gillian Lannister, who had lived in Casterly Rock with her Frey husband since her marriage. Tywin, you cannot continue like this. There are matters within the city that require your attention. Tywin turned, his once smooth forehead now edged with wrinkles, thin lips tightly pressed, and the stubble along his jawline bristling from his clenched teeth. What could possibly be more important than my brother's funeral? Outside the walls, the Squidmen sent forth a missive, requesting that we dispatch someone for negotiations. The troops within the city require your command, and defenses must be arranged. You are the leader of the Lion's Pride, and must present yourself before them now. Gina's voice was husky, clearly having just wept. She vowed that should her husband or son perish, she would not suffer the same anguish as losing any of her brothers. The greedy brigands, unable to breach the treasury, sought to deceive their master into offering gold or even the keys. Tell the soldiers that any thief who approaches the walls shall show no mercy. What they receive from me will only be the edge of my sword. Tywin's fury was palpable, yet his tone remained grave. Perhaps we should send someone to hear what they have to say. This is an opportunity to observe them. We still lack understanding of our foes, and I wish to see my enemy with my own eyes, to remember him, and then take my revenge. Gina spoke these words through gritted teeth. You are my last sister. The term sister was emphasized heavily by Tywin, who said nothing more before departing the Hall of Heroes, leaving Jaina Lannister to weep once again, covering her face in sorrow. At this moment, Bardas felt a surge of anxiety. Since the beginning at the Sealskin Corner, he had closely followed his elder brother, engaging in every battle thereafter. This was the first time he was tasked with the primary assault while his brother assumed the role of a feigned attack, evoking both a sense of trust and an apprehension towards the heavy burden of responsibility. Bardas paced back and forth, observing the thorny figure seated cross-legged before him. Her eyes were tightly shut, brows slightly furrowed, and he could discern the eyelids encasing the ball quivering incessantly. Her lips alternated between pressing together and releasing. As if exhaling a sigh of relief, she was deeply engrossed in an intricate shape-shifting link. In the present day, the shapeshifters under Noen had largely abandoned this method. Yet occasionally, when more precise and detailed intelligence was required, they resorted to it. After all, the consciousness of beasts is simplistic, capable of executing rudimentary autonomous tasks. But when it comes to scouting the distribution of enemies and the architecture of structures, it is best to spare them from such complexities, matters that even humans must undergo training and learning to truly master. I had always perceived shapeshifters as monsters, as blasphemers. Yet now it seemed that you were not so fearsome. Aeron Greyjoy, like all Ironborn, was coarse and fond of drink. Among Balon's brothers, Aeron was the least conspicuous, his age being comparable to Bardas. Bardas had heard numerous secrets from his brother Colin, many of which he had come across in Pike, including tales of Aeron. Bardas bore no disdain for him. Their interactions over the past few days had been relatively pleasant. It was said that the drowned god spoke the language of sea beasts. What one might refer to as language, I suspect, resembles the communicative methods of shapeshifters. In fact, no one had a sea beast companion, and I had heard their calls numerous times, which could hardly be classified as a language. So, you wish to prove the sanctity of Noen? Spare me. Such sentiments are better reserved for the drowned men. No, I require no validation. The Ironborn seek leaders who can lead them to plunder and victory. The drowned men are significant, but as long as Noen can deliver triumph to the Ironborn, they will support him without hesitation. I harbor no doubt in this regard. Aeron seized his large, extravagant waterskin and took several hearty swigs before passing it to Bardas. So, shall we merely wait idly? Clean water is prone to spoilage. Liquor is an essential thirst quencher aboard every ship. Having nearly languished in thirst all day, Bardas was already parched and ravenous. Upon Aeron's arrival, he seized the opportunity to partake in food, just as the dry, hard bread threatened to choke him, and he took a swig from the waterskin. We must ascertain every mine and secret passage within that cavern. This is crucial. If we ultimately discover that the city requires a full frontal assault, Noen will order a retreat. Senseless sacrifice is not the mark of a wise leader, Bardas declared while swiftly consuming the food before him, aware that they might be here for an extended duration. Very well, the captains are restless. They wish to unwind in the city. Then let them wait, and everyone must remain vigilant. There are still ships in the harbor of Kaon City. If anyone's foolishness leads to our discovery, I shall flay him alive, Bardas shouted in irritation. Furthermore, inform them that the captain and sailors here will receive a larger share of the spoils. Although Bardo is reckless and impetuous, he is not devoid of wisdom. He simply does not utilize it often. At least now he recalls that Noen once told him that to inspire loyalty, one cannot rely solely on force. Necessary incentives and appeasements will encourage their willing service. I shall do so. Reconnaissance has always been a meticulous endeavor. Bardo yearned to wield an axe and personally swim to the port of Carrock City to investigate, yet he could not afford such a luxury. What was that phrase again? To stir the grass is to alarm the serpent. His mother must oversee extensive surveillance of the entire area to promptly detect reinforcements, and Corin is absent. Bardo realized with dismay the fragility of his own patience, just as Bardo grew anxious over the sluggish pace of reconnaissance. A corner of the great gate of Carrock City slowly opened. The old lion had ultimately decided to dispatch an envoy. Chapter 11. Time. We need time. Tyrion observed the encampment of the Ironborn. Although Tywin had never entrusted him with command of an army, he had perused enough books to grasp the essence of military strategy. The camp appeared chaotic, yet possessed its own internal logic, as if each position could swiftly support one another. Lacking a unified logistics system, the Ironborn, even once ashore, continued to organize their combat in units of ships, with each tent resembling a vessel on land. Under the guidance of a rugged captain, Tyrion approached the central command tent, which bore no distinguishing features from the others. Any attacking force would surely find themselves disoriented by the nearly identical tents. Tyrion pondered how the Ironborn managed to differentiate them. Salutations to you, Count of Bloodstone Island. I bring greetings from Carrock City, Tyrion said, placing a hand over his heart in salute to Noen, who occupied the seat of honor. Tyrion tilted his head to regard Noen, compelled to do so both by his stature as a dwarf and by Noen's extraordinary height, even while seated. As rumored, a wild boar always accompanied him, and he was clad in armor, draped with a voluminous cloak predominantly black, adorned with silver thread. Tyrion was certain it was silver, for fabric stained with blood is notoriously difficult to cleanse. Though the cloak was black, it bore visible clumps, yet the silver patterns gleamed as if brand new. He wore no helmet. A thick beard framed his face, meticulously groomed. His hair, not particularly long, was partially tied at the back. Years of maritime life had rendered his skin coarse, and his features were stern, but the scars on his face lent him a fearsome appearance, reminiscent of a sea monster. The helmet, resembling a grotesque head, was held in his left hand, its menacing tendrils coiling atop, as if it were a crown. His armored fingers tapped rhythmically against the helmet, producing a clattering sound. His right hand rested against a warhammer, within which he grasped a solid gold goblet. Tyrion had seen King Robert's warhammer, yet Noen's was longer and larger. Its head resembled a blacksmith's hammer rather than the sharply defined edges of a traditional warhammer. Could this swineherd harbor dreams of becoming a blacksmith? Tyrion chuckled inwardly at the absurdity of his thoughts. I had once considered you to be Tyrion Lannister, but I did not expect Tywin to truly send you forth. However, it is not entirely surprising. Tyrion had anticipated being ridiculed or threatened. Yet this towering figure exuded a composure distinct from his formidable physique. After all, he had encountered another giant, one even larger than this one. And his impression of giants was rather unfavorable, perhaps due to his own status as a dwarf. Moreover, this colossal man had just slain the favored giant of his father. Tywin. Good heavens, if it were not for the undeniable reality before him, he would find it implausible that anyone could vanquish the mountain in single combat. The noble lord has heard of me. I am astonished that my reputation has reached the Ironborn, although I am well aware it is not one of good repute. Yet, the mere act of having my name spread is, in essence, a positive occurrence. Tyrion intended to articulate further, but was interrupted by Noen's raised hand. From this moment forth, he harbored a disdain for the Ironborn. Tyrion mused. Do not misconstrue my intentions. To conquer your adversary, one must possess a profound understanding of him. It appears your father harbors a genuine loathing for you, Tyrion Lannister. Known, typically not one for idle chatter, found today to be an exception, for reasons unspeakable. And in an effort to draw the attention of those within the city towards himself, he required time, not much, but sufficient time. Noen believed that the old lion likely shared this sentiment, for Tywin remained unaware that his message had failed to reach its intended audience. Of course, even so. As Adalric had stated, the surrounding territories would inevitably discern the anomalies surrounding Casterly Rock and Lannisport. However, with each passing day, Noen's chances would incrementally improve. He was confident that the victory in the afternoon would render the old lion more cautious. With towering walls and impregnable fortifications, all that was needed was to bide their time for victory. This was the old lion's belief, and the hope Noen cherished. Ah, you know, my lord. In the eyes of their fathers, all dwarves across the realm are akin to bastards, perhaps even lesser than bastards, for at least bastards can grow tall. Tyrion shrugged, resuming his eloquent discourse, seemingly immune to such rhetoric. Or perhaps, he was acutely aware of his place. I am uncertain how the Iron Islands regard dwarves. I have yet to set foot there, though perhaps one day I shall wish to see it. You will not go, not now, nor ever. Another voice interjected from within the room, that of Adalric. Following the Battle of the Whispering Hills, he had been summoned to provide counsel to None and had accompanied him to the meeting to receive invoice. From the moment Tyrion entered the tent, these individuals had regarded him with indifference or avarice, as though he were not a living being, but rather a slab of meat awaiting dismemberment upon a butcher's block. Now, with None finally having company in conversation, Tyrion let out a significant sigh of relief. "I do not comprehend your meaning, sir. How shall I address you, my lord?" Tyrion discovered that no one was prepared to introduce him, and even the burly brute who had spoken, after delivering his words, merely crossed his arms and regarded him with a cold indifference, reminiscent of their initial encounter in the great tent. "By the seven hells, how rude these people are!" Tyrion muttered to himself, casting another glance at the fearsome assembly, both standing and seated, and was left with no choice but to pose his own inquiries. "In the Iron Islands, there are no dwarfs, nor do they harbor any fondness for them. Your coin holds no value there. The Ironborn procure what they require through iron and fire, a process we refer to as paying in iron. And with your diminutive stature, you would merely find your throat slit and be cast into some forgotten corner. They would not toss you into the sea. That honor is reserved for warriors, as the drowned gods require rowers, and you cannot even wield an oar." Adric offered no response to Tyrion's question, dismissing the notion of divulging his name to a dwarf, and continued to speak for himself in a tone devoid of emotion, as if recounting a simple tale filled with bloodshed and savagery, yet he remained unfazed. It appears I have not offended you, my lord. Yet you seem to harbor considerable animosity towards me?" Tyrion inquired with perplexity. He was met with hostility toward every dwarf, or rather, the Ironborn bore animosity toward every dwarf. Those who are incapable of plunder and combat have no right to exist in the Iron Islands. Their fathers would drown a dwarf at birth and bury him in a place that would never be remembered. This is mercy, little one, the mercy of the Ironborn. Dunstan Drum was among those with avaricious gazes. He looked at Tyrion as if he were a nugget of gold, mingled with disdain. For a dwarf weight could not compare. It sounds like a cruel place. Tyrion found himself at a loss for words in response to such sentiments. He could not discern where this so-called mercy lay. Had a dwarf truly lived among those barren islands, he might grasp that it indeed represented a form of mercy. "I have heard that your father's chamber pot is made of gold. Is that true, little one?" Dunstan had not forgotten about that pot. "I recall the original phrase, Tywin Lannister's excrement is gold. My lord Drum, I doubt anyone can produce gold from their bowels. While my father does not possess a golden chamber pot, he certainly has an abundance of gold." Tyrion, lacking insight into the Iron Islands, noted that the impressions these people left were that of mere brigands. Even the accounts from the learned scholars of the Citadel brimmed with inaccuracies. Fortunately, he had fared well in his studies of heraldry, as he recognized the skeletal hand emblem upon Dunstan's cloak. I do have a fondness for gold. To be frank, I intend to replace the bones on my family crest with gold after we conquer Casterly Rock." Dunstan paused momentarily before continuing. "Perhaps I could shape the outstretched skeletal hand into a fist, clutching that non-existent chamber pot." As Dunstan finished speaking, he erupted into laughter, and soon, everyone, including Nune, joined in his merriment. The man's laughter was as boisterous as his stature. Tyrion observed the raucous band of ruffians, particularly Nune, whose uproarious laughter was almost deafening. "Forgive my candor, esteemed lords, but my father dispatched the ravens this morning. By tonight, news will reach Firekeep, Ketchtown, and Ferry City. The port of Casterly Rock has already been sealed. Despite the modest fleets of the three cities, should they converge upon Casterly Rock, even if the Iron Fleet were to triumph, it would be exceedingly difficult for you to carry away substantial spoils. The cost may outweigh the benefits. As for the land forces, Silver Hall, Foul Hall, Corntown, and Sarsfield City are but a day's flight for the ravens. The path to support Casterly Rock is unobstructed, and I fear you may find yourselves compelled to retreat before long. Naval support shall not exceed 3 days. While cavalry may be somewhat slower, they will not take more than 7 days. In such a brief span, any attempt to seize the castle will demand tremendous sacrifices from you. Our fortifications are robust and have never been breached." Tyrion continued to articulate the pros and cons, yet he noticed that every chief within the tent regarded him with bemused expressions, seemingly unperturbed by the impending threat. Either they had made prior arrangements, or they were supremely confident in their plans. A flicker of concern crossed Tyrion's mind, but recalling the defenses of Casterly Rock, he dismissed his trivial apprehensions. He could scarcely fathom how these brutish men, wielding axes, might breach the proud fortress of the Lannisters. The Ironborn do not shy away from sacrifice. The drowned god welcomes every valiant warrior who perishes in battle, and there, the feasts are replete with endless wine and sumptuous fare. Adric's voice remained calm, as though he were stating an undeniable truth. Yet, Meaningless sacrifice is hardly commendable. I respect the Ironborn's faith, should the drowned god accept a dwarf. Perhaps I could entertain him with a comedic performance. Every feast ought to feature jesters. For what is merriment without a touch of folly? Tyrion chuckled lightly. The Ironborn find joy in axes and swords. Their songs are the battle cries of fury. Their music is the tempest and the waves. The drowned god requires no fool, nor do the Ironborn relish in mocking the maimed. Tyrion sensed that his usual eloquence had utterly failed amidst these barbarians. They were wholly disinterested in discourse. Thus far, he had uttered naught but greetings. If Noon were privy to his thoughts, he might have remarked on the distinction between common folk and brigands. Commoners, whether driven by power or gain, are inclined to listen earnestly to others' perspectives, while brigands seek only to plunder every valuable possession from you. Then spit upon your lifeless body, perhaps lamenting that your resistance wasted too much of their time. Now, let us address more pressing matters. I had thought we were already discussing important affairs, my lord. Norn paid no heed to Tyrion's jest. A half-man who delighted in teasing others but reveled even more in self-mockery. Norn, however, preferred the coarse humor of Dunstan, whose vulgarity brought a certain amusement. I have many captives, including knights from your verdant lands, as well as your Lannister kin, and it seems even Sir Stafford, the brother-in-law of Tywin. We have already paid the iron price, and the Ironborn do not slay those who lay down their arms. We require laborers and salt wives. After speaking, Norn glanced at the cup in his hand, confident that the astute Tyrion would grasp his meaning. My father, Tywin, has sent me to mend our misunderstandings and to forge friendships. Lannisters have always been generous to friends. We shall offer gold and supplies in gratitude for your long journey. Tyrion's words elicited satisfied laughter from the assembly, followed by a time of revelry and jest. He did not arrive alone. He brought ample wine and provisions to host a grand banquet. Contrary to what Adric suggested, the Ironborn were indeed inclined to mock the weak, which made them seem somewhat cowardly, yet this tendency is a common trait among humanity. As Tyrion articulated, needless sacrifice is devoid of purpose. When one reveals a vulnerability or displays weakness, the Ironborn will ensnare like venomous serpents, either tearing away sufficient gain or shattering delusions with the righteous hammer of justice. Chapter 12. The eye of the shapeshifter Tywin gazed down at the boisterous camp beneath the city walls, hoping that the fine wine his dwarf son had brought would render them thoroughly inebriated, though he recognized the improbability of this wish. He yearned to relieve his pent-up frustration. Thorne strode confidently along the corridors of Casterly Rock, her thick footpads making no sound against the cold stone. With her head held high and her keen eyes surveying the surroundings, the captive struggling in her small mouth made her appear like a victorious general returning from battle. These walls exuded wealth. She must have ventured into a significant part of the castle, she thought. Traditionally, reconnaissance tasks had been the domain of those capable of flight. But Thorne, having joined Norn's fleet for some time, was now entrusted with such an important mission for the first time. According to Bardis the Giant, the fate of the city hinged upon her success, and she felt elated to undertake such a pivotal role. The Protector was a good man, though regrettably already spoken for. The free folk were indifferent to such matters. They would reclaim their men or women if necessary. Yet, the Protector was rather imposing, and Thorne felt content simply to be acknowledged as one of his spear wives. The free folk thrived under the Protector's leadership. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say they naturally aligned with the Ironborn, much like the Protector's oft-repeated adage, a harsh land raises harsh people. For the free folk, to attain what one desires, one must strive for it oneself. Jinji no longer indulged in idle thoughts. Instead, she devoted herself to a more earnest observation of her surroundings. Having diligently studied cartography, a requisite subject for shapeshifters under the aegis of the Protector, she had achieved commendable results, at least as praised by Lady Cleriana. Wow, little one, you are truly splendid. Allow me to behold our little warrior. You are remarkably capable. Perhaps I should request Lord Tywin to bestow upon you a medal, mused Jaina Lannister as she traversed the broad stone slabs of the golden corridor, each polished to a mirror-like sheen. Even in the night, a few candles were sufficient to illuminate the gilded pathway. She reminisced about her childhood days spent racing with her brothers within the castle, recalling the solemnity of Tywin standing at the corridor's end, vigilantly overseeing their antics. She remembered Kevin, arms outstretched like a protective hen, safeguarding the boisterous tiger from colliding with the walls, alongside the delightful Jillian. Now, they were all gone, leaving only Tywin, the grave and earnest elder brother, the hero who had rescued House Lannister, a poignant thought that struck Jaina Lannister. Do not blame him, Tyrion. I know how deeply you love Joanna. At the moment of receiving dreadful news, his tenderness and thoughtfulness were swept away with the stranger. I understand, Aunt Jaina. At least he raised me rather than allowing me to drown, providing me with ample resources. The ladies adore a patron like me, Tyrion quipped upon his return. bringing back trivial news and a bill requested by the Ironborn, which incited Tywin's wrath. Jaina gazed at the small cat cradled in Tyrion's arms. Its lush golden fur adorned with brown tabby stripes, a firm white ruff extending down to its tail, and most notably, a charmingly elongated mane at the back of its head, rendering it akin to a diminutive regal lion. What an adorable little creature. Is this perhaps a newly acquired Mouser? I wonder, for the castle's mines are rife with rodents. Though they sometimes venture into the kitchen to pilfer fish, most of the time, these unruly little beings remain below. It is common to see them basking in the sun in the stone garden, and occasionally, there are unfamiliar faces among them. Bending down, Jaina took the cat from Tyrion's embrace, stroking its soft fur, which elicited a contented purr from the creature. Such a rare beauty indeed. I have seen similar patterned little ones, yet none possess its majesty. Perhaps its father was a long-haired cat, and its mother an orange tabby, making it a long-haired ginger. Perhaps I should keep it close. You know, Tyrion, I have few companions left to converse with, and it may ease my solitude. Tyrion fell silent. Recognizing that aside from their father and that bothersome sister, their relatives treated him well, particularly a few uncles. He empathized with Aunt Gina's sentiments, for he, too, felt the same. He resolved to utter some playful remarks to cheer her up. The battleground for men lies within their careers. For women, it is the birthing bed. While for cats, it is the pursuit of mice. Each individual has their designated place. Jaina. Tyrion first mimicked Tywin's grave tone to deliver a few words, then, with a playful grin, remarked, I am certain that old Tywin would tell you just that. Huh. Indeed, it sounds like something he would say. Bun stretched lazily, deftly extricating herself from Jaina Lannister's ample form, and leaped from her generous bosom. In midair, she swiftly twisted her body, leaving a trail of petal-like paw prints upon the gilded walls. Upon landing, she did not linger but scampered to Tyrion's side, seizing her feeble captive and darting towards the corridor's end. Bun was hungry, and Thistle needed to find a safe place for her to feast. After a day of wandering the castle, Thistle herself surely required sustenance. It seemed the day's tasks were to conclude. I told you these little creatures are wild and untamable. No matter, once we have dispelled that bothersome squid, I shall locate it again. Of course, as long as it remains within the castle. Perhaps it should be confined until we become more acquainted, then I shall take it to a gathering. Tyrion smirked, nonchalantly continuing his conversation with Jaina, their contrasting heights casting elongated shadows in the resplendent corridor. Thistle held a fondness for these furry little beings. They were spirited, agile, cunning, and exceedingly clever. Most importantly to her, they were utterly adorable. The Protector had once imparted certain talents of shared companionship during their training, earning him the title of Master Shapeshifter. Men were often enamored with direwolves, snow bears, or the Protector's wild boars, as well as creatures like unicorns, perhaps because during talent sharing, it could enhance their endurance and such. It was curious how these obstinate, foolish men often fixated on peculiar matters. Yet, these animals tended to be rather cumbersome and lacked agility. Thistle relished climbing trees and scaling mountains, despite the frigid heights that could chill one to the bone. She always delighted in ascending, gazing down upon the vast, snowy expanse below. She had pondered shape-shifting into various birds, ultimately realizing her preference for measuring the heights of mountains and trees with her own feet. Her two shape-shifting companions were also these delightful, furry creatures, the larger of which she could now ride. Although it could not don heavy armor, it remained a perilous predator, traversing the edges of jungles and battlefields alike. Well, have you figured it out? Bart, upon learning that Thistle was indulging in food, hastily arrived at the heavily guarded ship's hold, observing her delightfully feasting and anxiously inquiring about her discoveries. I found a tunnel leading to the upper castle, but the guards and workers along that route are quite dense. It will be challenging to evade their gaze entirely. Bing now finds himself in a chamber filled with gold. Once I regain some strength, I shall first chart this route before exploring if there are more clandestine paths. Thorn, while swallowing her food, recounts her findings, and Bartle listens attentively, presenting his own demands. He seeks to ensure the smooth progression of our battle. Furthermore, we must identify a location that can accommodate a sufficient number of people and establish defenses swiftly. Initially, we cannot deploy too many personnel. These individuals must be ready to open the sealed port to allow reinforcements during the conflict while also fending off any attempts by the Lannisters to block the lower mines. I understand. Next, I shall wander through other areas of the castle before returning to the mine to pass the remaining time. Very well, ensuring one's safety is paramount. Moreover, your large cat remains useful. Without its owner's command, its combat prowess will diminish, and we cannot afford to lose such a vital asset. Should a shapeshifter's companion be slain during their deep connection, it would harm the shapeshifter's spirit, necessitating a period of recuperation. Rest assured, Bing Bing is quite endearing and holds much popularity within the castle. At that moment, a shadowy bobcat sauntered over, nudging its massive head into Thorne's embrace before rolling onto the dry deck of the ship's hold, revealing its fluffy white belly, then raising a pair of soft, furry front paws in a playful gesture to pat Thorne's plump cheeks. Indeed, Faya is equally charming, as delightful as Bing Bing. Mother adores you both. Not receiving the desired response, Faya angrily flicked her fluffy tail and prepared to leave Thorne's embrace. Thorne tightly hugged her to her chest, causing Faya to extend her front paws wide. Subsequently, Thorne buried her head in the cat's neck fur, greedily inhaling its scent while emitting a contented sound. The large cat, Faya, relished this treatment, narrowing her eyes and extending her pink tongue to brush against her quivering whiskers. Observing the interaction between the two, Bartle remarked, "I shall not disturb you. Rejuvenate yourself. Prolonged deep shape-shifting is a heavy burden. When you are ready, inform me, and I shall arrange for the guards outside the hold." Understood. Let Bing Bing roam freely for now. He will avoid the crowds. Our bond is remarkably strong. I shall rest before seeking him out. Bartle departed, needing to report the progress to his elder brother and provide him with a more accurate basis for judgment. Meanwhile, within the besieged camp beneath Cayenne City, a feast continued. Norn forbade several Ironborn from competing in finger dances. "I still require your fingers for other tasks. This is not the time for frivolity. Greater glory awaits us. And I trust the drowned god anticipates our victory. Should you choose not to heed my commands, you may come and play with me." Almost every Ironborn had heard of Norn's illustrious name. Those fortunate enough to witness his throwing axe technique dubbed him the king of finger dances. The titles of the Ironborn are often infamous or renowned, or so it seems for each individual. Unlike the knights of the verdant lands, the Ironborn bear a reputation both glorious and infamous, devoid of any embellishment. When dubbed the king of finger dancing, he truly embodies that title, with no Ironborn daring to contest this assertion. The once boisterous camp fell into a hushed silence after the revelries of feasting and drinking, uncertain if fortune would favor them with an ambush that night. Noan eagerly anticipated another visit from the Lannisters, for diminishing the enemy's strength is always a source of delight. Chapter 13. The Ironborn's front line. As Noan wrestled with concerns for Casterly Rock, the Iron Fleet had just sailed past the Shield Islands, a chain of isles originally developed by House Gardener of Highgarden as a bulwark against Ironborn raids. Once known as the Misty Isles, these lands had been repeatedly conquered by the Iron Islands, serving as a springboard for their indiscriminate plundering of the riverlands. The former Iron King, Jorlin Blackdyed, infamously slaughtered the then king of the riverlands, Giles Gardner, and fed his dismembered remains to the fish. It was not until the time of Giles Gardner that the influence of the Iron Islands was decisively expelled from the Isles, which Giles subsequently named the Shield Islands, thus ending the protracted struggle between the riverlands and the Iron Islands in that region. The primary defense here comprises the formidable stone castles on land, while the naval strength remains underwhelming. The waters surrounding are riddled with treacherous reefs, and the islands are characterized by rugged cliffs, with excellent harbors being a rare find, all of which severely hampers naval development. The Iron Fleet navigated out of sight of the islands, cautiously evading coastal surveillance to enhance the chances of a successful raid. They pressed on without pause, heading straight for the Green Haven Isle. In the great hall of the castle at Pike, Balon sat upon his seat of sea stone, quietly absorbing the news just received from the crow's nest. Pike Castle had no maester. Balon's brother, Euron, had succumbed to an infection from a wound. The maester, convinced that the traditional methods of the Ironborn could not heal the injury, insisted on employing his own medical practices. Balon believed that Euron's death was intricately linked to the maester's methods, and thus he inflicted a similar wound upon the maester, demanding that he cure himself. Ultimately, the maester met the same fate as Euron, falling victim to the infection, and from that day forth, Pike Castle has been devoid of a maester. The Ironborn, however, have their own methods for training crows. Euron's letter revealed that Noan had captured Lannisport and besieged Casterly Rock. It was said that those shapeshifters, or whatever they are called, guided his fleet through the tempest, unexpectedly seizing the port without losing a single ship. It appears that the shapeshifters possess considerable utility. Perhaps we should endeavor to gather some for ourselves. Euron was meant to set sail alongside Victarion, but Balon retained him in the archipelago, citing the necessity of his intellect. Though in truth, it was Euron's maimed right hand, now devoid of 3 fingers, that rendered him unable to wield a sword. And Balon was unwilling to send a non-combatant to sea. Victarion's fleet also had their own followers, led by Gilbert, and when he returns victorious, I shall seek his counsel. Balon chose not to pursue the topic of shapeshifters further, instead continuing with his discourse. Calculating the time, Victorian's fleet should have already passed the Shield Islands. He would release the Ravens as he traverses Whispering Bay. Once the threat along the western coast has been entirely neutralized, we shall promptly launch an assault on the coastal city, restoring the glory of Hall. Such thoughts clouded Yolan's mind. Ever since he lost half of his hand to Norn during the finger dance, he had become nothing more than a jester in Baron's eyes. The Baron consistently disregarded his pleas for battle, relegating his counsel to others while he himself remained a mere fool in the court of Baron. Upon concluding the discussions within the main fortress, Yulan retreated to his sanctuary at Blood Fortress. He removed his eye patch and gazed at his right hand, which was missing 3 fingers. He stared quietly, as if contemplating a treasure of immeasurable worth. At last, it seemed he had resolved to make a decision. Drawing forth a dagger from his waist. This dagger was peculiar, its blade twisted like the waves of the sea. In comparison to the dagger itself, the crossguard was disproportionately large, resembling outspread wings, while the hilt was distinctly short, adorned with barbed, fur-like protrusions. The skull at the tip bore unmistakable avian characteristics. This dagger appeared to be merely ornamental, for no one would be foolish enough to wield it in combat. Since Norn had departed north with half of the fleet from the Staircase Islands, the 3 city-states of the former Kingdom of the 3 Daughters had been restless. Their fleet set sail from Tylos, raiding the defenses under construction at Torment Abyss and supporting pirates in their harassment of passing vessels. The eastern coast, particularly Stannis, had remained relatively inactive. They likely had not yet received specific intelligence. Colin observed the chaos at Torment Abyss where the influence of Bloodstone Island remained feeble. Many merchant vessels were reluctant to pay taxes to Bloodstone Island and quietly circumvented Torment Abyss. Norn turned a blind eye to this. As long as the large trading companies persisted, Bloodstone Island would continue to reap its dues. Since seizing Bloodstone Island, Norn had been clearing out nearby pirates. Due to the brutal treatment of pirates by the Lord of Swine, those captains unwilling to submit had distanced themselves from the Staircase Islands. The terrifying headsmen would stack the heads of pirates into towering piles upon small islets, using them as a means of intimidation. This gruesome tactic yielded remarkable results, maintaining a rare semblance of peace in this chaotic region for several years. However, recent actions by the city-states of Riss, Tylos, and Mill had seen the return of pirates to this once-avoided locale, preparing to challenge the narrow sea fleet once more. They were far from friendly towards merchants. Ironically, this compelled the wavering small traders to navigate through the bays of Bloodstone Island, for it merely collected taxes rather than demanding lives. This was undoubtedly a positive development, and Colin welcomed it. Yet, the ongoing turmoil at Torment Abyss could not be allowed to persist indefinitely. Colin prepared to surprise the band of pirates using their preferred method, one that had proven effective time and again. Valamir, has your spotted whale still not been completely tamed? It should be manageable. It has accepted my commands to nest at designated locations. As you know, they are social creatures, and after much persuasion, it has finally agreed to dwell apart from the group. You ought to find him a companion. Perhaps we could cultivate a community, which would result in an underwater fleet. Hagen advised his disciple. I have indeed contemplated this, yet his kin seem reluctant to migrate, frightened away by the presence of the ship-eater. Coron pondered Hagen's counsel. The veracity of the ship-eater was increasingly alarming, and he could not shake the feeling that this ancient fellow was merely exploiting Bloodstone Island for sustenance. Perhaps he should suggest to Noen to locate the leader of the spotted whale pod, truly establishing a fleet of shapeshifters controlling the whales, which would be the most beneficial course of action for Bloodstone Island. As for the feasibility of this, Coron held no doubts. As for the ship-eater, let it fend for itself. That is a splendid idea, Valamir. In addition to scouting the movements of the Torture Abyss pirates, keep an eye on the whale pod. After arranging further reconnaissance and patrol tasks, Coron returned to his quiet chamber. He had long since resolved to dedicate himself to the drowned god, as his childhood experiences had exposed him to too much ugliness, and he harbored a profound disdain for rampant desires. Tywin ultimately refrained from launching an assault on the Ironborn encampment, despite Noen's deliberately intoxicated demeanor, which even compelled several robust drunkards to sleep outdoors. The cautious Lannisters remained steadfastly vigilant upon the city walls. The towering walls and towers of Casterly Rock were ablaze with light, and shadowy figures of patrolling soldiers never ceased, presenting a stark contrast to the seemingly lethargic encampment below. After a night spent in idle watch, Cerys brought news from Bardo and the captives from the battle at Lannisport. Inform Bardo that we must ascertain the exact locations of every mine shaft, every tower, troop deployments, stable locations, and any vulnerabilities in the defenses of Casterly Rock. Our intelligence team primarily relies on aerial reconnaissance. I dare not let them fly too low, as birds naturally avoid areas populated by humans, lest we attract suspicion. You are wise, Mother. Aerial reconnaissance should only provide a general overview. let Thorn bear the brunt of the labor. It was indeed a miscalculation. The companions of others were far too conspicuous. It seemed necessary to train some less noticeable animals, as relying solely on Thorn was proving too slow. Due to the numerous mines, the castle was infested with mice. They were easily controlled, yet equally susceptible to capture. It was prudent not to hastily augment our ranks. There were few cats aboard the ship, and those little creatures were not particularly friendly. Long-distance connections posed dangers for shapeshifters, while remote links required stable marks. Through prolonged interaction with their animal companions, shapeshifters could sense each other's positions within a certain range. However, with unfamiliar animals, some powerful shapeshifters could briefly exert control, though this method often engendered resentment, making it difficult to establish intimate bonds thereafter. Some irritable and cautious creatures might even react violently. If the shapeshifting technique were not sufficiently refined, it could result in the shapeshifter's consciousness being unable to return to their own body. The surrounding trees were too sparse. Dismantling the wooden houses of Lannisport would allow for the construction of some catapults to give the inhabitants of the castle a task to occupy themselves. As Norn and his mother grappled with the challenge of enhancing the fleet's reconnaissance capabilities, the gates of Casterly Rock swung open once more. Through the narrow crevice, one could glimpse the formidable walls behind, likely a testament to the strength of the castle. At that moment, Bouncing was merrily patrolling the ramparts, meticulously observing the distribution of sentinels and the positions of hidden fortifications. With a glance at the open gates and the encampment beyond, Bouncing flashed a grin, poised to explore the next locale. Behind the main gates of Casterly Rock stood a towering keep, bifurcating the path to the inner fortress towards the barracks and stables. Unbeknownst to any would-be assailants, even if they breached the gates, they would find themselves ensnared by the vigilant defenders awaiting them. I have often remarked that Tyrion resembles you most closely, to the extent that you have refrained from speaking to me for months, Tywin. Nonetheless, I must assert that Tyrion is your rightful heir. You could easily appoint another, remarked Jaina Lannister, observing the procession slowly making its way outside the castle. Casterly Rock shall never fall into the hands of a dwarf. I have labored tirelessly to restore the pride of House Lannister, and I will not stand idly by as it is shattered, she continued. Moreover, he has always taken pride in his quick wit and intellect. Now is the time for his so-called talents to shine. You still cling to the fantasy of Jaime shedding his white cloak. Historically, there has never been a precedent for such a thing, Tywin countered. During the reign of Aegon III Targaryen, Robin Arryn was deposed by Lord Wielder, who acted under the king's explicit direction. Tywin obstinately maintained his stance, despite the fact that the historical events he referenced occurred when the king's authority was usurped. And Regent Wielder nullified the king's commands, rendering such comparisons moot. That is not the same. The debts of the Iron Throne were settled by Casterly Rock in recent years. While the king squandered wealth recklessly, the gold mines of Casterly Rock remain far from depleted. Trust in our king. He would be more than willing to sell a place in the King's Guard. Jaime will not be pleased. I do not require his approval. I merely need him to inherit. Once the games of knighthood have been played, he must assume true responsibilities. The tone in Tywin's voice became somewhat gritted as he spoke of responsibility. Historically, there has never been a white knight of the Lannister name. In fact, among the prominent noble houses, aside from the Baratheons, white knights have rarely emerged. For lesser nobility, the honor of protecting the king and the royal family without land or marriage may hold significance, but among the great houses, the number of white knights is scarce, let alone the firstborn. Yet, it was precisely King Aerys Targaryen who appointed the heir of Casterly Rock, Jaime Lannister, to the King's Guard, his white knight. The naive youth, still harboring dreams of heroism, may have perceived that as glory, but Tywin recognized it for what it truly was, sordid politics. Aerys employed the most direct and effective means to diminish the Lannisters, exploiting the ignorance and aspirations of Tywin's eldest son, resulting in Casterly Rock losing a competent heir and being left with a dwarf. Thus, when the stag raised its rebel banner, Tywin wielded the sharpened blade he had long honed against the king and friend he once served loyally. The madness of Aerys not only cost him his throne, but also brought humiliation upon me and my family. A Lannister's debts must be repaid. It further insulted my wife. Tywin silently reflected. Even though the rebellion has concluded and the stag has cast the dragon down from the throne, Tywin remains indignant towards Aerys Targaryen. They could have forged a prosperous future together. This belief has long been held by Tywin, and he remains steadfast in it. Chapter 14. The king in King's Landing still engages in debauchery. King's Landing, the capital of Westeros, the so-called heart of the Seven Kingdoms. This city is vibrant, noisy, and filthy in every conceivable sense. As the political and economic center of the Seven Kingdoms, merchant ships from across the world dock here, while supplies from nearby caravans and castles flow in and out through the port of the Blackwater. A multitude of commoners congregate beneath the city walls, toiling for their livelihoods. They reside and struggle here, relying solely on the precarious labor opportunities the city offers to barely make ends meet. If the slums are the external blemish of King's Landing, then the flea-infested dens near the Steel Gate, beneath the Dragon's Lair, represent the city's grave affliction. The city's architecture radiates from 3 central hills, resulting in chaotic planning and congested streets, with the thoroughfares for loading and unloading goods muddied and impassable. The refuse generated by the populace remains unmanaged, freely and abundantly scattered, causing the stench of the city to linger year-round. Perhaps the dragon family that established the city was not only heat-resistant but also odor-tolerant. This metropolis is rife with murder, robbery, and petty theft. The presence of as many as 7 gates renders defense a nightmare, while the royal fortress, the Red Keep, situated at the mouth of the Blackwater, adds to the confusion. It seems that the conqueror believed that as long as dragons existed, no matter how many ships approached his ancestral stronghold, they would be reduced to ashes. Regrettably, his descendants lack his ambition, confined to this corner of the world with no progress, embroiled in mutual strife and murder, ultimately leading to the extinction of dragons. The once unyielding Iron Throne was seized by the offspring of the conqueror's bastard brother, culminating in a different kind of decay. Throughout the ages of conquest, countless ambitious souls have staged dramas in this city, each taking their turn upon the stage, some for family interests, others for so-called honor, yet none have considered the lives of the common folk who come and go, living and dying like industrious ants, unregarded by all. The siege of Casterly Rock continues, while the rulers of King's Landing find themselves unable to locate their king. The proud Eagle of the Vale diligently manages his realm on behalf of his adopted son and king, allowing the Stag King to indulge in revelry and vice. These are the king's own words. Another day of the routine court meeting unfolds, but seated upon the throne is not the king, but rather the Duke of the Vale, the current Prime Minister of the 7 Kingdoms, Jon Arryn, the hand of the king. Since ascending to the throne, the king has scarcely sat upon that iron seat, leaving its governance entirely to his father-in-law and Prime Minister. Recent disturbances in the Stepstones have raised concerns, as half of the sea monster's fleet has suddenly sailed north, and the Iron Islands have maintained an ambiguous relationship with the Iron King, with Balon never having shown fealty to King's Landing. Most importantly, I have never received any reports of fleet sightings from my nest. They seem to have mastered methods to evade coastal surveillance or navigate the high seas. This is certainly not a favorable development. Master Pycelle has served as the Grand Maester since Tywin ruled over King's Landing, and even with the Stag now on the throne, he remains in his esteemed position, a true stalwart of the political arena. The royal fleet has been patrolling near the Stepstones. Do you have any news, Stannis? The Prime Minister's voice is as aged as his years, yet remains clear, revealing that the burdens of his work have neither crushed his body nor diminished his enthusiasm. Aside from training and escorting, there is nothing particularly noteworthy. However, the recent protection afforded to pirates by Tyrosh has posed some complications for them. Stannis Baratheon, as the king's younger brother and master of ships, attends the council meeting. Unlike his elder brother who is open and forthright, Stannis is a man of solemn seriousness. Norrin Greyjoy has accepted the king's grant. I suspect he believes he can do as he pleases until he instigates rebellion. The speaker is Lancel Baratheon, the king's youngest brother, who has just been summoned to the council as the master of laws. Unlike Stannis, he is a jovial fellow with little martial prowess. Lord Lancel has only recently joined the council and may not yet be fully aware that, although Norrin Greyjoy has accepted his title, he has not penned any letters to King's Landing declaring his loyalty. Although he has received the royal tax collectors, the Iron Throne has not received even a single copper star from the ports there in recent years. Peter Baelish has been in the position of Master of Coin for less than a year, yet he arrived earlier than Lancel and is quite capable shortly after taking office. He began to untangle the chaotic financial system that emerged post the War of the Usurper. The Stepstones have always been a chaotic domain, riddled with pirate dens. Even I have heard tales of the Narrow Sea Fleet's efforts to eradicate piracy. Maintaining such a substantial fleet must come at considerable expense. The Earl of Bloodstone has consistently charged a mere 1/7 toll on each ship's cargo, providing escort services for a period far below the tax rates of the 7 Kingdoms. Is it not reasonable that they struggle to collect taxes? One must admit that Lancel is a good man, yet in this court rife with intrigue, a good man is often exploited. The 3 Baratheon brothers are ill-suited for this palace. King Robert Baratheon is a warrior and a libertine. The second brother Stannis Baratheon is a fool lacking in adaptability, and as for the youngest brother Lancel Baratheon, as previously stated, Lancel is a good man. Our Earl of Norrin is not impoverished. He has constructed a town on Bloodstone Island, which, although still unfinished, surpasses many of the wealthiest lordships in the Seven Kingdoms in both size and scale. He has plundered numerous slave ships from the Bay of Slaves, extracting hefty taxes from the slave cities along the southeastern coast of the Stepstones. Everyone can find work at that grand construction site, and he has even prohibited begging, declaring that those unwilling to work shall not reside on the island. Varys paused briefly before continuing. The people there exhibit unwavering loyalty to the Earl, regardless of their past identities, ethnicities, or social standings. Does this not strike one as a commendable quality? It is inappropriate to dismiss a vassal's fidelity based on mere conjecture and speculation. As the Minister of Justice for the realm, it is my duty to uphold the righteousness of the kingdom's laws. In any case, I firmly believe that an earl appointed by the king should be judged by the king himself. By the way, this marks my inaugural attendance at the Royal Council. But where is His Majesty? After Lysa's statement, a profound silence enveloped the room, while Varys gazed upwards at the ceiling, as if the ancient stone dome held an exquisite beauty. Ultimately, it was Stannis who responded to his awkward younger brother. The king never participates in the Royal Council. Stannis' reply was succinct and direct, devoid of any embellishment, as though the king's absence had become a commonplace occurrence. Why? I had assumed that the Royal Council was convened for the king. You have only just arrived. There are matters I will elucidate for you later. For now, let us deliberate on other issues. Regarding the Stepstone Islands, as Lysa mentioned, we should merely keep watch. Until Lord Norrin explicitly rebels, we are not to interfere. The Prime Minister interrupted the feudal discussion. Duke John, since his arrival in King's Landing, has been directly involved in nearly every matter. Despite his graying hair and sparse teeth, he remains astute and capable. Over the years, the Seven Kingdoms have gradually emerged from the shadows of war, and Robert's reign has become increasingly stable, a testament to the old Prime Minister's efforts. While the Royal Council diligently manages the kingdom on behalf of the king, our sovereign is not in King's Landing at this moment. Early in the morning, he departed through the Dragon Gate with his retinue and Kingsguard, bound for a small port near the Iron Gate to embark on his cherished ship, the Lady Lyanna, for a hunt in the royal woods. As for why he did not take the nearer Mud Gate, it may be due to the proximity of the brothel favored by the debauched king, the Shatter establishment. Ser Bollistan Selmy, the captain of the King's Guard, did not attend the council. He now stands vigilantly guarding the king's ship. Listening to the sultry melodies emanating from the hold, the old knight's countenance remained impassive. He adhered to the principles taught to him by the knight, known as the White Bull, Ser Jorah Mormont, who once draped him in the white cloak, to protect the king, not to judge his actions. Seven hells, how can one still perceive the stench of this city here? King Robert, having indulged himself, stood upon the deck, gazing at his city with profound reflection, while the vigilant captain remained non-judgmental at his side. He spoke rarely, even at the Royal Council, only offering reasonable counsel within the scope of his duties. Yet, each of his utterances was inevitably loyal to honor. Can't you speak a few more words? Don't just stand there like a wooden statue. We are here to unwind. If it pleases your majesty. I require it now. I have grown weary of those little wits and their slick tongues. You ought not to speak of it in such a manner, your majesty. It is now your city. I am aware. Thus, I entrusted the task to John. The old fellow has always been diligent, and I hope he acquires more perfume to alleviate the foul stench of this place. It is my belief, your grace, that governance is what King's Landing requires, rather than mere fragrance. Indeed, governance. When I struck down this realm with a hammer, no one informed me that governance would be necessary. I never aspired to occupy that iron chair. Had it not been for Lyanna, my Lyanna, that which is unattainable is often the most coveted. This was particularly evident in the case of King Robert, who, it is said, still uttered her name, Lyanna Stark, while engaging with the queen. This has led to discord in the royal relationship, directly linked to the king's profound affections. King Robert is an optimistic soul. In one breath, he laments the loss of his beloved, and in the next, he retreats to the hold of the ship. The Lady Lyanna is not only a splendid royal vessel but also a swift warship. They swiftly disembarked on the opposite bank of the Blackwater River, where King Robert eagerly commanded his entourage to forego their protective duties, wishing instead to compete in the hunt, with the victor receiving his reward. Everyone is aware of the king's generosity, and as a warrior king, he indeed has little need for protection. The capabilities of the current Kingsguard vary, but the most esteemed among them is undoubtedly the valiant Ser Barristan, who has made his name on the battlefield, a fact that Robert particularly admires. As for the other members of the Kingsguard, apart from Ser Mandon Moore, the king believes he could easily vanquish them single-handedly. King Robert is certainly one of the rare warriors in the Seven Kingdoms, and a king wielding a hammer is undeniably a formidable opponent. Ser Barristan remains steadfastly by the king's side, accompanied by his sworn brother, Ser Mandon Moore, a taciturn and humorless man. The other 5 brothers are guarding the queen and the king's children within the city. The future of both the king and the realm is equally vital. Ha ha, splendid shot. Ser Tallard. King Robert had not amassed much in terms of game. A few small rabbits hung behind his saddle. Bored, he ambled his steed through the woods and beheld an exquisite arrow. Robert laughed heartily as he tossed his flask to Ser Tallard, a commoner elevated to knighthood for his valorous steeds, who frequently accompanied King Robert on his ventures. Just moments ago, he had felled a fleeing stag with a single arrow. Thank you, your grace. I believe we shall have dinner tonight. That trifle scarcely suffices to fill my teeth, replied Tallard as he slowly maneuvered his horse closer to Robert, respectfully returning the flask to his king, who nonchalantly took it and drank deeply. Where have all the beasts of my woods fled? I suspect they are too intimidated by the majesty of the king to approach, your grace. The speaker was Ser Donther Harlaw, who gazed longingly at the flask in the king's hand as though it were a sack of gold. The king, fond of his jest, presented the exquisitely crafted wine jug to Ser Torment. Keep it, Torment, Robert declared, preparing to mount his steed and resume the pursuit of his quarry. At that moment, a rustling emerged from the thicket ahead, as small, skittish creatures fled in panic. Ah, a formidable beast has arrived. Protect his majesty, Tallard shouted. I require no protection. Stand aside, the king retorted. Your grace, we do not yet know what has emerged, cautioned the dutiful Ser Balon. Whatever it may be, do not attempt to seize it from me. Robert's voice boomed, reminiscent of a child fearing the loss of a cherished toy. Are you frightened, fearless Balon? There is naught to instill fear in me, your grace. Huh, then step back, for my prize is not easily obtained. As their banter continued, the great beast of the forest finally revealed itself, a fully grown wild boar. It was said that the wild boars of Essos were of a size comparable to wolves. Yet the boars of Westeros were of a far grander scale. The creature stood as tall as the knight's steeds, its broad body making it appear even more imposing. It is mine, roared King Robert, seizing the lance from his attendant, readying himself for the charge. However, Ser Balon raised his hand to halt the eager king. Your grace, the fate of the kingdom rests upon your shoulders. You ought not to take such risks. Nay, I have a son, and it cannot harm me. The wild boar, sensing the malice of the humans, stomped in anger and burst forth from the underbrush. Aha, come forth, beast, ignoring the protests of the king's guard and attendants. Robert brandished his lance overhead, gripping it in such a way as to maximize his strength, and he galloped forth with a roar. Balon hastily followed his king. Unable to retrieve the lance from his attendant, he drew his sword instead. Others, unwilling to be left behind, emulated the charge. The distance to cover was brief, scarcely enough for the steeds to reach their full gallop, yet Robert's eyes sparkled with excitement, his thick beard failing to mask the wide grin upon his face. Just as the horses were about to collide with the wild boar, Robert skillfully urged his mount to leap left, creating space for his lance. Without hesitation in battle or hunt, he thrust the lance downwards with force, striking true. It pierced the beast's neck in an instant. Though the wound was mortal, it did not incapacitate the creature immediately. The pain only fueled its fury, and it retaliated by swinging its head, using its sharp tusks to eviscerate the horse. The injured steed reared in agony, spilling its innards like a rushing torrent, and its rider was unceremoniously thrown to the ground. King Robert reacted with remarkable swiftness upon landing. He rolled to dissipate the force of the impact. The king, with all fours on the ground, did not hesitate. With a powerful push of his legs, he advanced towards the fallen warhorse, where the beast had extracted the tusks embedded in its side, while Robert seized the hammer from the horse's back. Chapter 15, ready yesterday. Robert hunted a wild boar of considerable size. Jaime Lannister lay on the queen's bed, recounting the amusing happenings of the city that morning. When I went to greet the king, I saw it. Its entire head was nearly crushed by his hammer. He paraded it through the city and distributed portions to the common folk, including all the game they had brought back. Now, the people of King's Landing are cheering for the boar slayer, a truly benevolent king. I couldn't care less. I am more concerned about where he is. Queen Cersei stood naked, her back to the king's Kingsguard, holding a red silk robe with golden trim, assessing her figure in the copper mirror. Where else could he possibly be? Jaime scoffed. How did the boar not eviscerate him? I've had enough of this drunken fool. You should kill him, Jaime. Spare me. I have already slain one king, and now they call me a regicide. If I were to kill another, what would they call me then? How can you stand idly by while he disrespects me? On our wedding night, he even shouted another's name. Cersei wept, and Jaime Lannister, feeling his own misguided passion, could not bear her sorrow. He embraced the queen tightly, lifting her in an attempt to comfort her, fulfilling his pledge to serve the king while soothing his distressed queen. The duty of the Kingsguard is to protect the king, safeguard the royal family, and fulfill the desires of the king or royal members. Undoubtedly, Sir Jaime Lannister was an exemplary guard. Anyone wishing to harm the queen would first have to penetrate Sir Jaime's body. Not only did Jaime protect the queen, but he also fulfilled her desires. Most importantly, he persuaded her to abandon the perilous notion of assassinating the king, thereby preserving the stability of the realm and the monarchy. Unbeknownst to the Lannisters in King's Landing, a crisis loomed over their family. Meanwhile, beneath Casterly Rock, Tyrion Lannister once again visited the camp of the Ironborn. In the central tent, only Norrin remained. "My lord, the defenses of Casterly Rock are impregnable. I trust you have experienced this firsthand over the past few days. My men require more. I must fulfill their needs, as this is the sole reason they have accompanied me to sea." Due to a lack of siege equipment, Norrin had organized several small-scale raids at night, which yielded no results. Now, prisoners had been returned to Casterly Rock, and Norrin was preparing to discuss the value of Lannisport with Tywin. "I see the siege towers being constructed in the camp, my lord. The path to Casterly Rock is narrow, surrounded by sea, and the rocky cliffs are unsuitable for climbing. The city is not entirely unprepared. Your plans may face considerable challenges. I am aware that I have traversed the terrain, and regarding my proposal to the Lannisters, what did Duke Tywin have to say? To be frank, my father told you all to go to hell. It is the first time I have ever heard him utter such coarse language. Even in anger, he typically resorts to more refined expressions. How I long to hear him say such words in person, yet he is unwilling to meet with me. Perhaps I should venture in and speak with him. I have long heard of the illustrious Lannister lion, and now, being so close yet unable to behold him, is indeed most disheartening." Noan's expression was sincere, his eyes brimming with hope. Tyrion had never encountered someone quite like him. Were it not for the corpse returned to Casterly Rock a few days prior serving as a grim warning, he might have wholly believed Noan's words. If the noble lord were amenable, Casterly Rock would certainly welcome him with open arms. I am confident my father would be equally elated. Of course, I shall go, though it may not be feasible at the moment. As you can see, my camp is abuzz with activity, leaving me little time to spare. Tyrion sensed that the man across from him displayed no hint of anxiety, even as news from the castles had been conspicuously absent, prompting Tywin to rage against his vassals within the confines of his chamber. Tyrion felt an unsettling dissonance, yet his existing knowledge offered no clarity. Noan's composure only deepened his suspicions. He could only continue to probe for information from Noan. Thistle was currently vexed, and Bump was exceedingly displeased, harboring a grudge that would require a year's worth of dried fish to appease. Bump's mind was filled with a cacophony of complaints, lamenting that its fur and claws had been worn down by the jagged stones. Thistle was a formidable shapeshifter, yet she cherished her companions deeply, often reluctant to compel them to engage in distasteful tasks, as was the case now, where she could merely strive to comfort the agitated Bump. This was the last mining tunnel, and thus far, it was the finest she had discovered. This tunnel nearly evaded all sentinels, connecting below to several natural caverns at the Casterly Rock harbor, while above it ascended directly to a tower adjacent to the stone garden. Its sole drawback lay in being obstructed by rubble in several places, and some areas were exceedingly narrow. However, this was of little concern, as there were numerous alternative tunnels along the way, albeit at the cost of increased distance for clearance and heightened risk of discovery by patrolling soldiers. Naturally, such considerations were not Thistle's to ponder. After all, the decision-making rested with that giant, Bardo. Her task was simply to map out the routes and then act as a guide to lead the sailors along the path Bump had previously traversed. As Thistle comforted her companion, she reminisced about the places she had visited. The predicament faced by Thistle and Bump stemmed from the necessity to ascertain the conditions of these tunnels. For centuries, the Lannisters had excavated gold mines beneath this castle. With new discoveries, there would invariably be old ones, as the former tunnels were not abandoned due to depletion, but rather because easier locations had been unearthed. As a mine shaft is no longer in use, it is simply repurposed to stack the discarded stones excavated from other tunnels. Thorne must ascertain whether these shafts still hold any value for clearance. The richness of the gold reserves here is such that even if the Lannisters were to mine for 1,000 years, they would scarcely exhaust it, especially since they do not continuously exploit their gold mines. They only extract a few shipments of gold or during times of familial crisis or when cash flows run dry. Whether as the most powerful vassal in the Westerlands or as the lord of the entire realm, both the port of Lannisport at the foot of the mountains and the trade gains of the Golden Fleet are the Lannisters' proverbial treasure troves. The intricacies of human thought are difficult for animals to comprehend. Bouncy merely perceives her owner as foolish. Why, she wonders. Must her master claw through a path when there are clearly alternative routes to the same destination? Although Bouncy is curious about what lies beyond the stone-blocked areas, Her master shows no interest, only desiring to move forward. Hence, she thinks, why not take the longer way, you foolish creature? Regardless, Thorne's reconnaissance has concluded. She and Bouncy slipped away from the iron gate of the port of Casterly Rock, edging closer to the iron tax collector of Bardis. Bouncy remains disgruntled. Her initial passage was effortless, but returning requires utmost caution, as her master has nearly worn down her claws. After confirming that Bouncy can indeed make her way back independently, Thorne relinquishes her awareness of the creature. Ilyn, tell the lads to perk up. From this moment on, let them feast freely, but no drinking allowed. I am nearly driven mad by this wretched place. Are we finally going to take action? Ha ha ha, let us wait for news. I have already sent a message to Norn. We must wait for them to strike first. If they do not make enough commotion, we may find ourselves trapped within that tortoise shell. Meanwhile, Norn is still engaged in casual conversation with Tyrion, who enjoys the dwarf's company, at least for the pleasantness of his speech. I am not a butcher, he asserts. I have stated that the Ironborn do not slay those who lay down their arms. But I cannot stand idly by while my brother's blood and sweat earn us a city only to hand it over without a fight. My lord, as a friend, your price is exorbitant. Casterly Rock cannot produce such a sum of golden dragons all at once. Do you have any idea how many carts would be required to transport that many dragons? Tyrion muses, thinking that this damned squid man ought to pursue a career in theatrics. They have meandered here half the day, yet the topic remains fixed on golden dragons. He has calculated the worth of every Lannister, including his own, and can always steer the conversation back to the original path as if he has never encountered gold dragons before, just as they were preparing to continue their circular discourse. Lady Lyanna entered the tent. So be it, Tyrion. The fleet I have brought is substantial, yet our bounty is scant. If the sailors are not satisfied, I cannot guarantee what they might do. Return and inform your father. This is my stance. Tyrion cast a curious glance at the woman who had just entered. She appeared to be in her 30s or 40s, with a lithe figure that was unusually tall for a woman, reminiscent of the beauty Brienne from Tarth. Though she was indeed strikingly beautiful. Barto is ready, declared Clisha as she watched the dwarf depart the tent. Let them rest well. It seems we are in for another sleepless night. Noan summoned the leaders participating in the siege. Adric was the first to arrive, followed by Dunstan, Galspaven, and Gwendolyn. Upon seeing Clisha in the tent, they seemed to grasp something, excitement gleaming in each of their eyes. Are we to commence? Galsp should have been acting alongside Barto. But in Noan's plan, the vanguard required only a select few elite individuals. Once they captured the harbor of Cairn Castle, Tristan and Geode would depart from Lannisport to provide support. Unwilling to wait idly, Galsp followed Noan to the siege instead. We shall initiate the assault first, drawing the attention of Cairn Castle to the main gate, thus creating an opportunity for Barto. We have constructed only 3 trebuchets, and the crossbows unloaded from the ships have been fitted with wheels and shields. Our resources are limited. We possess only 1 complete siege tower, while another remains inadequate in height, though it too has wheels. Adric was tasked with overseeing the construction of the siege engines. The Ironborn were not typically adept at storming castles, often relying on sudden assaults for victory. However, they were not without their successes in siege warfare. History bore witness to numerous castles breached by the Ironborn. That will suffice. Our objective is not to breach the main gate. The siege engines need not play a significant role. They merely must defend against the arrows and crossbow bolts from the castle, minimizing unnecessary casualties. Haha. I certainly do not wish for Barto to consume all the spoils alone. Let me scale the side wall once more, Noan. Dunstan continued to obsess over the pot. And now everyone in the camp was aware that even if Tywin lacked that pot, he would forge another with the gold he had seized. Very well, let us prepare. Set the cauldrons, and commence the assault after sunset. It is no longer necessary to conceal our movements. For days now, Cairn Castle has observed our actions from its heights. We shall proceed boldly. Chapter 16. The Assault and Infiltration in the resplendent dining hall of Cairn Castle. Tyrion continued to express his concerns to Tywin, who was increasingly unwilling to listen. The Ironborn's raids and the disdain of his vassals left him seething with rage. It seemed the West had forgotten the fate of Castamere. Once this was all over, he would ensure they remember the fates of Reyes and Tarbeck, the consequences of defying their lord. Tywin thought fiercely. No matter what those brigands intend to do, I shall not grant them a single copper star. If they wish to besiege the castle, let them come. Cairn Castle has never been breached since its inception. Tyrion, in stark contrast to his previous fervent assurances before Norrin, harbored a nagging suspicion that the vassals' apparent negligence was more profound than it seemed. With Tywin still among the living, his ruthless methods were not something anyone desired to provoke. Furthermore, even if the vassals intended to feign compliance, they ought not to be so overt about it. They could delay their march or feign effort. Yet it was inconceivable that not a single raven would be dispatched to Casterly Rock. Nobles, for the most part, were rather mundane creatures, quite willing to pen a letter in jest at Tywin's expense or engage in trivial excuses. Still, no response from the raven. Father. Humph. Tyrion's apprehensions were indeed justified. The vassals should not remain completely silent. Jenna Lannister, alongside her Fry husband and several sons, occupied the space to Tywin's right. Are you suggesting that the Ironborn have shot down my ravens? Casterly Rock stands tall. I fear their arrows cannot reach such heights. Jenna too was troubled. Casterly Rock was her home, yet she could not fathom how the Ironborn might intercept the ravens. I have heard tales of shapeshifters who can transform into various animals. It is said that Stark can become a wolf, and the Reed folk can turn into lizards. Could there be shapeshifters capable of becoming birds? Eamon Fry cautiously offered his opinion, appearing older than Tywin, although he was Tywin's brother-in-law, and indeed older in years. The Fry family's twins were situated near the North's formidable waters, where the moving castle of House Reed, Greywater Watch, lay. They often heard the legends of the North. Nonsense. Tywin had never favored this brother-in-law, deeming him one of the shames left to the family by his father. This disdain made Eamon tread carefully within the castle's confines. I find some merit in my uncle's thoughts, by excluding all possibilities. Those that remain may indeed hold significance. You wish to use the tale of the old nurse to explain this? I would sooner believe in the unseen dragon of the squid outside the castle. At that moment, a tremendous noise reverberated among the debating individuals. What is happening? Jenna queried. Perplexed. I shall investigate. Before Tyrion could scurry away on his short legs, he was hastily intercepted by the rushing Davin Lannister. The Ironborn have commenced their assault, my lord. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Norrin began issuing orders for the siege. 3 siege engines, crafted to resemble tortoiseshells, were slowly wheeled from the camp towards the narrow entrance of Casterly Rock's gates, necessitating space for the siege towers. The first to exert force were the catapults. Their numbers were few, primarily due to the terrain, as there was insufficient room for many, and those that could fit were too distant. The stones could only be hurled into the sea or scratch the towering peaks. Aside from the solitary hill upon which Casterly Rock stood, the surrounding lands were fertile, with most ammunition being sourced from the dismantling of Lannisport or excavated from the projected heights of Casterly Rock's towers. It is a well-established fact that the Iron folk are incapable of excavating on their own. Rather, they compel the captives of Lannisport to toil in the mines. Notably, even such shallow excavations have yielded rich deposits of gold-infused shale, leading Norn to speculate that the entire mountain may be a colossal vein of gold. The terrain of Casterly Rock slopes steeply from west to east, with the stronghold of House Lannister situated on the side facing the Sunset Sea. Primarily inhabited by family members and their retainers, the wooden structures within the main fortress are scarce, as most of the edifice has been meticulously carved from the original mountainside. Encompassing the principal mining shafts, significant family burial sites, and granaries capable of sustaining Casterly Rock for several years. Adjacent to the eastern fields lies the secondary fortress, comprised of sculpted stone and wooden dwellings, predominantly occupied by soldiers and craftsmen. In the southern coastal area, a square exists, featuring a mining passage that connects to the port and shipyards of Casterly Rock, which the Lannisters refer to as the Craftsman's Way. The barracks and stables are also situated here, serving as the primary target for catapults, as other locations are either too distant or futile for assault. Hastily arriving at the secondary fortress, Tywin stands upon the battlements, observing the slowly advancing crossbows and the even slower siege tower, inquiring, "Are there sufficient logs within the castle?" "As per your command, my lord, the barracks are always stocked with an ample supply of logs," replies Devon Lannister, Tywin's brother-in-law's son, whose capabilities surpass those of his father, and who serves as an adept military commander responsible for the defense of Casterly Rock. As they draw nearer, Tywin reflects that this siege may endure for an extended period, and he cannot ascertain when their vassals will arrive to lend assistance. Perhaps their messages have been intercepted. The Lannisters are more than capable of driving them away. I shall not permit them to ascend the walls. Tywin utters no further words, merely nodding at Devon as he continues to gaze upon the Ironfolk marauders outside the fortifications. The pace of the catapults is sluggish, and the nearby quarries are not conveniently close. However, the structures of Casterly Rock are sufficiently resilient. The initial barrage of projectiles has only resulted in the destruction of a few wooden edifices, leaving the mountain-carved bastion largely unscathed. Meanwhile, the port of Casterly Rock remains eerily vacant, as nearly all soldiers have been dispatched to the secondary fortress for the defense. Although many merely seek to witness the unfolding events, in the tranquil waters, throngs of Ironfolk navigate with their shields and favored axes, with Bardo leading the charge. The sea lion, with a vigorous splash, drags the armored snow bear Old White and Bardo beneath the immense iron gate of the port. Accompanying them are several seals and sea lions, the companions of other shapeshifters. Aside from the ship swallowers, Bardo serves as their leader. These amphibious beings are tasked with transporting the initial batch of equipment for the Iron Folk into the port, their speed surpassing that of humans, having made numerous trips already. The speed of the iron species was remarkable, and the depth of the Cayenne City port was sufficient to accommodate the largest merchant ships currently afloat. Aside from the iron gate on the water's surface, there was no underwater barrier to impede passage. Bardis effortlessly navigated around the gate and into Cayenne City port, accompanied by seasoned veterans from Bloodstone Island, as well as Island and the crew of the Huanyu Storm. Thorns and her companion, FIA, awaited them on the embankment, where she leisurely perched on an iron post tied with mooring ropes. Dressed in lightweight leather armor adorned with reinforced metal plates, she carried a short axe and a long sword at her waist, with a round shield slung over her left shoulder. Upon spotting Bardis, she approached and grasped the towering figure emerging from the water. FIA had already dealt with the guards on the shore, her stealth skills proving invaluable as she moved silently. Is that the passage to the secondary fortress? To the right. Island, have your men block that entrance. We cannot allow Lannister to descend in support. Understood. Let us prepare our gear. Bardis and Island, alongside the Iron Kin, began donning their armor. The sea lions and seals possessed great strength, enabling everyone to be fully armed. They affixed cloth to their armor to muffle the sounds of their movements. The more agile members followed Thorns to the winch, commencing the ascent of the iron gate. Bardis sought a dry spot to inscribe 2 notes, handing one to the glutton and wrapping the other in a pouch for Bang Bang. He first released the glutton and then placed the second note into Bang Bang's mouth. He gently caressed Bang Bang's round head. Good boy, find my ship and deliver it to those above. Bang Bang, having once saved Bardis's life, earned his gratitude. It affectionately nudged Bardis's palm, letting out a sound that seemed to convey, leave it to me. You can trust me. Before plunging into the water, followed by its companions, swimming towards their master. On land, they lacked combat prowess, so returning to the sea was their safest option. The noise of the iron gate being lifted was drowned out by the crashing waves. Bardis glanced at Island, who had already made his way to the right, and, with the fully armored Old White leading the charge, they proceeded towards the mine tunnel leading to the main fortress. The distance to the secondary fortress was not great, and Island quickly arrived with his men. Peering through the iron bars, they observed the hurried movements of soldiers outside. Island commanded the construction of fortifications within the mine. The tunnel was spacious enough to accommodate 5 to 7 individuals walking side by side. Once Island's men erected a series of triangular supports resembling caltrops. He leisurely began to sip on wine. Captain, are we merely going to wait here? What else do you propose? Do you wish to charge out? The door does not open from the inside. Our axes are sufficient to cleave it open. And then risk jeopardizing the ambush plan? I fear that afterward, no one would flay your skin. Best to wait patiently. They will open the door for us. The questioning sailor from the portly family could only sit in frustration, silently quenching his thirst with wine. Meanwhile, Bardis, guided by Thorns, made his way to the mine entrance leading to the stone garden. The journey was remarkably serene, encountering little in the way of obstruction, if one could count the occasional rat. Bardo expressed his gratitude towards the Lannister shipyard for providing ample timber, enabling him to secure the vital access points of the city with only a minimal number of guards. While the Lannisters were not entirely devoid of sealed mines, with some significant structures barred by iron gates, these barriers were not insurmountable. In truth, each tunnel could be adequately defended with merely a few shields and spears. The sea, under the watchful eye of Casterly Rock, lay fully exposed. The confident Lannisters believed they could bolster their defenses only upon perceiving any threat from the sea. Indeed, who could foresee that these intricate pathways had been thoroughly mapped by the shapeshifters? Chapter 17. The rat offensive Bardo had already infiltrated. Cerys returned to Lannisport as Norn prepared for the siege. The nobles within this port were either ransomed by the Lannisters or executed. Soldiers and officers were shackled to dismantle stones or construct siege camps, while the wealthy were plundered and dissenters cast into the waters to feed the fish. The surface of Lannisport was littered with naked corpses. Perhaps even the drowned god required laborers, for with so many Ironborn heroes entering his watery palace, mere mermaid hospitality would surely fall short. What are we waiting for? We shall weigh anchor and set sail. The chieftain, Godric, gazed longingly at the battlefield beyond the walls, eager to join the fray, yet bound by the tasks assigned to him. There were still matters to attend to within the city. While the common folk lacked the courage to rebel now, their resolve might change in our absence. Tristan Fawn was a man of remarkable composure. Both in life and in battle, the harshness of his sealskin upbringing had shaped his character. Leave everything to Cerys. I wish to be idle no longer. The Ironborn ought to plunder. Just leave me 3 ships' worth of men to guard the port. I need not concern myself with the city's affairs. The main gate has already been dismantled. Even if they organize, they cannot impede the retreat of the forces outside. This aligns with Norn's intent. Indeed, once Casterly Rock falls, the inhabitants will submit readily. Let us attack. The night was adorned with a sparse moon, casting a silvery glow upon the shimmering sea. Where the reflected stars flickered in harmony with the gentle waves, a sight tragically destined to go unnoticed. Outside the walls, the clamor of battle persisted, with the formidable defenses repelling wave after wave of attackers. The guards atop the lighthouse anxiously observed their comrades valiantly repelling the enemy, yearning to join them in combat. Yet duty bestowed by the Duke rendered them immobile, reduced to cursing the ignorance and valor of the Ironborn. What time is it? The witching hour approaches. These scoundrels began their assault at sunset, and now, as the witching hour nears, must they not return to their slumber? Go tell those thick-headed fools, after all this time, they have yet to breach the inner city, oblivious to their purpose. Ha ha ha, Casterly Rock will teach every fool who dares challenge her the true meaning of invincibility. Behold. What is that? A ship. Sound the alarm. At the moment the bell tolled, Devon Lannister dashed towards the southern tower, peering down. Despite knowing that the harbor was sealed, he promptly dispatched workers to close the gates, confident that the Duke would make a similar decision. When the gates to the workers' passage swung open, a cruel smile crept across Euron's face. Devon had no intention of safeguarding the harbor. He was even prepared to pour oil into the mine tunnels once the Ironborn infiltrated, intending to unleash a devastating blow. The soldiers at the workers' passage were few in number and unprepared for an assault from the tunnels, for they believed the area remained secure. As the sentinel turned to accept a lantern from his comrade, a sudden gust of wind roared behind him. He barely reacted, mistaking it for the sea breeze wafting from the mine. A wicked throwing axe embedded itself into the skull of the shield-bearer. The sound of the blade striking armor lost amidst the cacophony of battle, but the imminent specter of death was unmistakable. As the sentinel collapsed, his fellow soldiers swiftly realized the attack had commenced. The Ironborn surged forth with their round shields from the narrow passage, the unexpected assault granting them no chance to shut the gates again. Their hastily organized defense was dismantled by the axes from various angles, while the Ironborn maneuvered across the expansive square, swiftly neutralizing the threat. Makeshift barricades were swiftly erected by the Ironborn, who had emerged from the tunnels. As the square was cleared, by the time Devon received word of the situation, Euron had already barricaded the path leading to the square behind him. The completed barricade stretched across the main road connecting the square and the workers' passage. Devon was oblivious to how and when the Ironborn had infiltrated the castle, but he understood the urgency of driving them back into the tunnels and sealing them off, lest the relentless tide of Ironborn obliterate the defenses of the keep. Unbeknownst to Devon, the scene unfolding before him was not an isolated incident, but rather a simultaneous occurrence throughout the castle. By the time the Lannisters finally recognized their oversight, it was already too late. Outside the walls, Norn sensed a sudden diminishment in defensive strength, yet breaching the formidable fortress from the front remained fraught with challenges. Ultimately, he acquiesced to Dunstan's proposal. They would seize the chaos within the city to scale the walls of Castle K, choosing a near-impassable cliff located to the south of the fortress. Baron had once scaled the cliffs of Flint south at the tender age of 10 to enter the haunted tower of the blind lord, Flint. The Ironborn, skilled in climbing as they were in sailing, often employed such tactics to launch surprise attacks on enemy strongholds. Bardas, much like his companions, recklessly plunged into the ranks of the Lannister forces. The soldiers of the keep were few, primarily stationed on the walls operating siege engines. Their hurried arrival left them ill-prepared to confront the onslaught that had already begun. Where did they emerge from, this infernal 7-layered hell? Tyrion shouted uneasily. The mines. Tywin's voice bore little alteration, yet the tension in his tightly clenched fist betrayed a facade of calmness. I understand now. What do you comprehend, Tyrion? Jaina, too, donned her armor, evidently startled by the sudden influx of Ironborn from the mines, the only lady of Casterly Rock. It's that cat, the long-haired orange feline. The golden lion, what ails her? Ah, I hadn't anticipated that you had already bestowed a name upon her. Tyrion longed to mock his Aunt Jaina, yet he recognized that this was not the opportune moment. The skin changer, dear aunt, do you recall the skin changer? Uncle mentioned that our raven might have been intercepted by birds transformed by the skin changer. That swineherd's nonchalant demeanor, that exquisitely beautiful kitten he had long plotted for. Whether in the wild skirmishes outside the castle or the ostentatious negotiations, or the prior probes in tonight's grand offensive, all served merely as a ruse to cloak his skin-changer-esque reconnaissance of the fortress and infiltration. That swineherd is an evil sorcerer. Gina shrieked in terror. No. It must be another form of magic, or perhaps not magic at all. I cannot fathom it. Perhaps enough? Regardless of whether they are sorcerers or skin-changers. This horde of sewer rats must be driven back into the mines. Tywin was acutely aware of the proximity between Lannisport and Casterly Rock. The Ironborn reinforcements would soon arrive. And should they breach the city, the fall of Casterly Rock would merely be a matter of time, whatever means that swineherd employed. We now know one thing. He must kill with blade and sword, and thus they can be slain by blade and sword. Tyrion, you go to the secondary fortress. Gina, there is no need for a woman here. Seek a place of safety. Upon uttering this, Tywin strode toward his legion, for the presence of a lord often bolsters the morale of his troops. Aunt, heed his words. The clash of steel should not concern women. I do not wish for you to come to harm. The Ironborn are no benevolent beings. I know. Tyrion, I have always said you resemble Tywin the most. Safeguard yourself and pursue your honor. Similar to the Ironborn, Tyrion wielded a formidable, compact double-headed axe. The reason for eschewing a sword was likely that a dwarf-esque sword would be too diminutive for an adult, while a sharp axe suited for cleaving was ample for shattering an enemy's knee. Old White lunged ferociously at the little figure before him. The scent of blood igniting its senses, it loathed the encumbrance of armor, as its ample fat sufficed for protection in battle. Yet its master insisted on adorning it in armor, rendering its movements increasingly clumsy. The formidable snow bear, known as Old White, is not inferior in size to Humming, yet lacks the prowess for a head-on charge, rendering its role within the military formation rather limited. However, in the chaos of battle, it thrives. Since the sound of the alarm rang out, this tumultuous melee has persisted for some time. Most of the mine tunnels leading to the main fortress have been sealed, leaving only a simple accumulation of mining debris and rubble near the stone garden. Furthermore, it lacks the utility of the artisan path, resulting in narrow exits and passageways. Bardo, unable to construct a barricade as leisurely as Ilrin, dashed into the garden, striving to halt the advance of the Lannisters. With the arrival of Tywin Lannister, however, a multitude of well-equipped, fully armored warriors followed. Clutching shields in their left hands and flails in their right, they advanced in a tight formation, gradually pushing forward. The Lannister soldiers, barely holding their ground, retreated to the sides of the passageway, thus creating space for Tywin's forces to advance. Shield formation. Bardo raised his hand to halt Old White's reckless assault. Its strength pales in comparison to Humming, and its armor is significantly thinner. While it may topple a few warriors, the incessant blows from blunt weapons would surely claim its life. Before long, the ironclad shield formation stood resolutely at the end of the passageway, and the decisive battle within the main fortress was on the verge of commencing. Meanwhile, the secondary fortress was under the Iron faction's advantageous grasp. Thanks to the spacious artisan path, Ilrin had already erected barricades within the mine tunnels. As the Iron faction surged into the square, they merely needed to swiftly assemble these semi-finished barricades and affix numerous shields, effectively securing this landing zone for their reinforcements. Due to Dyvon's necessity to reallocate defenders to reclaim the square, None and his siege forces finally set foot on the inner city's ground. Their immediate task was to neutralize the formidable crossbows stationed on the walls. Dunstan's efforts were successful as Ilrin's diversion had restrained the guards on this section of the wall. They finally scaled the wall, which could be defended by a single individual, but the guards were currently focused on suppressing the Iron Men in the square, creating an opportunity for their commander to breach the blockade. While the crossbowmen continued to rain bolts upon Ilrin's south position in the square, Dunstan's hand gripped the crenellation of the wall. Although he had reached the top, standing behind the guards, the attention concentrated on the square had yet to waver. It was not until the sounds of approaching footsteps and the clanging of armor echoed behind him that Dunstan, prepared at that moment, swung his blade towards the archer who turned to investigate. Chapter 18. Breaching the city. Stop dawdling. Jump down. The longships summoned by the Ironfolk for assistance were shallow-drafted vessels, swift and equipped with multiple oars. The high embankment of Kagan City's port nearly aligned with the ship's rail. Before the vessel even docked, Geode eagerly leapt onto the shore, followed suit by the other crew members. The tactic of boarding was a fundamental strategy in naval warfare. In this world, aside from dragons, there existed few weapons capable of sinking a ship in a single strike. A collision typically indicated that either party possessed a significant size advantage or could strike the opponent's flank. To thoroughly sink a competent warship or merchant vessel at sea often required equivalent sacrifices. The sinking of a ship represented not merely an economic loss, but also the tragic demise of numerous skilled sailors. The Iron Folk rarely inflicted damage on the integrity of ships during naval skirmishes. Thus, boarding became the pivotal factor in determining victory. Capturing a vessel was invariably more cost-effective than constructing a new one. "Come, little one, I cannot remain idle," Geo declared, already advancing towards the passage leading upward before he had fully steadied himself. The path near Bardis was narrower, and their defenses would likely falter soon. "Follow me to the left." Thorns had not engaged in the defensive battle, as the route to the main fortress was too intricate. She had been dispatched to assist the reinforcements, accompanied by others. The route to the secondary fortress was easily navigable, requiring only one passage led by the Iron Folk who had traversed it before. Geode spoke little further. His forces were greater, and his combat experience more extensive. Drawing his longsword from his waist, he followed Thorns into the already lit passage. Tristan accompanied another crew member from the Yellow Rainstorm, proceeding to support Island. Island could still hold his ground, yet the arrows raining from all directions caused his sailors to flounder. There were 3 pathways leading to the square, with only the leftmost one remaining relatively safe, while the central and right side passages faced the elevated assaults of the defending troops. The only fortunate aspect was that the dismantling and transportation of the crossbow required time. Devon had not initially intended to employ it. But after several assaults had been repelled by the Iron Folk, the cavalry found themselves thwarted by caltrops. He had no choice but to order the crossbow from the city wall to be brought down. As Island anxiously glanced back at the mine passage he was protecting, hoping that reinforcements might arrive swiftly, a sudden roar erupted from an unexpected position. "The fallen do not perish." It was Dunstan. Island's eyes widened in disbelief as he gazed towards the city wall. Dunstan, brandishing the Valyrian steel sword Red Rain of House Drago, held aloft the decapitated body of a soldier, his hair standing on end as he roared in fury. Behind him, an increasing number of figures began to emerge, wielding axe and shield, charging towards the defenders on the wall. Though Dunstan did not descend to aid Island's precarious line of defense, his actions nonetheless invigorated the morale of the troops. "The fallen do not perish, they shall rise again, and with greater fury." At this moment, the forces of Tristan finally surged into the square. The ambush plan in the mines had already achieved significant success. It seemed that this castle, standing for millennia, was about to experience the impending bloodshed of urban warfare for the very first time. If you don't arrive soon, I shall meet the drowned god, you old seal." His oarsman was certainly sufficient. Now, his services were not needed. "Let us charge forth. Then let us go? For it has been a while since I have engaged in any activity." Observing the Ironborn who boldly crossed the Chevaux de Frise and flooded into the alleyways, Devon began to organize his men into neat ranks. Now was the time to test their patience. "Tyrion, take your men to guard the steps of the keep. We shall not hold out here for long. We should concentrate our forces." Tyrion spoke nervously, participating in war for the first time, unexpectedly tasked with defending his ancestral stronghold. "It is the same, Tyrion. If the keep is also ambushed, then the entire city of Casterly Rock is in jeopardy. Go and close the main gates. At the very least, we must prevent these people from scaling the walls. I shall hold them off for now. You must hurry. Victory belongs to you, cousin." Devon merely nodded, took up his shield, drew his longsword, and stepped into the front line of the shield wall alongside the anxious soldiers. "Send these squids back to the sea. Raise shields." Barto could not endure for long. The old white armor was battered and uneven, its movement no longer as agile as at the beginning. Barto's round shield was shattered, and he felt a searing pain in his left arm, the flail spikes having torn away a piece of flesh. They were now embroiled in a chaotic skirmish in the garden, their formation completely disrupted. Fortunately, the Ironborn excelled in this disorderly urban melee. They had not yet been entirely vanquished, but it was merely a matter of time. At some point, an old spear had lodged itself in the great paw of the white beast, rendering it nearly immobile. Its anguished roars attracted the attention of archers. As the clanging of arrows striking its body rang out, Barto raised a salvaged diamond-shaped shield to block the arrows aimed at his head. Through a gap in the shield, he spotted more supporting spearmen driving the Ironborn shield-bearers back, retreating under the sharp whistle of commands. This provided the Ironborn a momentary respite, but all knew that the final challenge was imminent. The surviving Ironborn gathered sparsely around Barto. Some no longer wielded the original round shields or battle axes. Although the fierce fighting was brief, it had still dulled their axe blades, rendering them nearly unusable. Barto withdrew the broken spear from the white beast's grasp, raised a shield, and prepared for a final, desperate confrontation. It seems I have not missed your gathering." Geode had finally arrived. "You could have come a bit later. Then I could have enjoyed this glory alone." "That will not do. I am not yet ready to attend your funeral." "Humph. Even in death, I shall not perish. By the drowned god, you are in quite a predicament, Barto." The armor of the King's Guard is made of gold. I must procure a set for myself. As laughter echoed, Tywin's expression darkened further at the increasing number of Ironborn. The narrow terrain was ill-suited for cavalry maneuvers, yet he unhesitatingly commanded a charge, believing that crashing against the walls was preferable to losing the castle. The clash of urban combat unfolded within the entirety of Casterly Rock. With the fighting in the mines being particularly brutal, soldiers had no room for retreat. The clash of spears and throwing axes reverberated as enemies surged unexpectedly from both sides, catching the defending troops off guard. Wails and cries echoed through the mine, resonating in every corner of Casterly Rock. Dunstan's assault disrupted the defenders' formation atop the walls, and mighty siege engines pivoted to face the city they were meant to protect. The purpose of the city had long been obliterated by the Ironborn who had scaled its heights. Noen, riding his boar, slowly entered the castle he had been yearning for over the past few days. "Mother, will we die too?" asked Lancel Lannister, gazing up at his mother. Lancel was the son of Ser Kevan Lannister and Lady Donella Swift, the eldest among them. Donella did not respond. Instead, she held Lancel tightly, nearly taking his breath away, her prominent belly confirming her pregnancy. "Casterly Rock shall never fall. Your uncle Tywin will surely defeat them." Little Lancel, Gina reassured her young nephew. She cherished every member of House Lannister, save for her husband and children, even though they were her own flesh and blood. Her eldest son, Cleo, and younger son, Leonor, fought within the castle alongside her husband, Eamon Fry. Amidst the chaos, they took refuge in the deepest part of Casterly Rock, the Hall of Heroes. Yet even the sanctuary no longer felt secure, as Gina heard the sounds of battle echoing from the golden corridor outside. The boar, unlike its master, was not in high spirits today. It relished the battlefield, perhaps due to having grown up amidst such chaos. Noen regarded the man challenging him, narrowing his eyes. He was not fond of this tradition. Why risk oneself for the sake of honor when one held the upper hand? Was it merely because the gods favored such folly? Noen was acutely aware that the deities of this world were indeed real. Yet, whether it was the warriors of the Seven or the drowned god of the Ironborn, or their arch-nemesis, the Storm God, they all harbored a peculiar fondness for one-on-one duels. Thus, when Devon realized he was flanked, he shouted towards Noen Greyjoy, "Face me. Face your mortal enemy." Noen desired to send the golden-haired man with the short beard to meet his long-lost companion with a swift axe throw. But the once boisterous battlefield had quieted. Both Ironborn and Lannisters fell silent, awaiting the duel that would determine their fates. Noen scoffed, both at the man's overconfidence and the foolish crowd observing. "I still do not know your name, golden-haired one," he taunted. "The son of Styver Lannister, Daphne Lannister, the one who shall claim your head." As Daphne approached Noen, he was unmounted, which led Noen to stifle a grunt. Having already accepted the challenge to duel, he was disinclined to resort to any trickery. Noen's weaponry was not particularly suited to him. His custom-forged axe had been taken by Kayvon and had yet to be returned, despite it not being Sir Kayvon's intention. Nonetheless, Noen held this grievance against the Lannisters. Clutching his warhammer, he had recently received a long-handled axe from Gales. The crescent-shaped blade was affixed to an oak handle. Daphne raised his shield and charged forward, bellowing what seemed to Noen as meaningless words. Noen stood resolutely, his left foot positioned forward with its toe pointing directly at Daphne, while his right foot was angled at a right angle beside him. His left hand, still curled, gripped the warhammer, while his right hand, holding the oak-handled axe, rested lightly against his thigh. "Die, scum." Daphne's voice boomed, perhaps to muster enough courage. Noen remained silent, unless mounted, since his steed required commands. The Knight of Westeros clashed with the brigand from the Iron Islands. Noen possessed an acute sense of distance, a gift bestowed by the storms. His endurance and explosive power also served him well, derived from his horse. Daphne opted for a conservative tactic, aiming to topple Noen using speed and his shield, while Noen chose not to evade. With a sweeping motion of his left hand, Noen swung outward, simultaneously lifting his right hand with the axe. Daphne, charging forth, extended his left hand, firmly gripping the shield, while his right hand raised high. The sword's tip slightly angled towards Noen's neck. The iron shield Daphne wielded produced a resounding crash as the force of the hammer transferred through his body, causing him to involuntarily rotate to the right. Continuing his assault, Noen leaned right after swinging his hammer. His left foot rose to support his body as he twisted left, his right leg stepping forward, while his right hand descended diagonally. Although Noen's axe was not particularly sharp, having endured a night of battle that dulled many axes without time to sharpen them, his strength compensated for these deficiencies. Daphne's armor was undoubtedly of high quality, yet the speed and force of Noen's axe were sufficient to extinguish Daphne's life. Daphne failed to discern Noen's face, Whether from the initial distance of the challenge or the swing of Noan's hammer, he missed the visage entirely. As Noan swung his hammer, his body turned right, effectively turning his back to his adversary. The descending axe provided no opportunity for Dafin to glimpse Noan's profile, as the somewhat dull blade embedded itself in his right shoulder. Chapter 19. The final struggle. Noan stood in the passageway leading to the square, with Dafin Lannister's lifeless body kneeling beside his left foot. The commander of the defense at Kyvon Castle. Before him knelt a throng of surrendering Lannister soldiers, stripped of their armor and shirts, with their hands bound behind their backs. How fares the mine? Is it still in our possession? At this moment, no one could provide answers to Norn, except for a few Ironborn guarding the artisan's path. Since the battle commenced, no one had any knowledge of the situation there. The mines remained, yet they were fraught with peril. The Lannisters had reclaimed control over some areas, but not deeply. Thorne was responsible for relaying information back and forth, and FIA's agile form allowed her to traverse the tunnels swiftly, though she was beginning to tire. Gales, leader of Gwen, you are to remain and secure the main castle road. Do not engage in a siege. As long as they do not emerge, we need not concern ourselves with them. I wish to join you, Norn. Gales expressed reluctance. You will reap the benefits. Just hold the line. Should we lose this hard-won ground, I shall see you hung from the mast. Very well. You are the chief. I shall heed your command, Gales grumbled. After arranging the defense, Norn hastened towards the mines with the Ironborn. This would be the final strike against the Lannisters, Norn mused. Tyrion observed the Ironborn taking refuge beneath the eaves on either side of the road, contemplating ordering a sortie to reclaim the secondary fortress. Yearning to recover the body of his cousin, Devon, whose corpse had been discarded in the middle of the thoroughfare. However, Tyrion understood that the Ironborn surely awaited his emergence from the fortified gates. He would not afford them that opportunity. The clamor of battle at the secondary fortress was gradually subsiding, as the Ironborn had largely taken control, seizing abundant siege equipment. Tyrion recognized that once the Ironborn were ready to assault the gates, passive defense would only lead to failure, particularly since they had thoroughly dominated the tunnels like vermin, capable of supporting any part of the castle at any moment. Bardo bellowed as he forcefully pushed back the advancing Lannister soldiers, swinging his battle axe, now dulled, down upon a helmet. The two factions clashed fiercely in an alleyway, with no space remaining between them except for the shields that separated the combatants. The pike had become useless, and the flail could not be wielded. The injured old wight could only shout encouragement from the sidelines, while long swords were abandoned, and short swords or daggers were rendered ineffective as the hands that once held them were now obstructed by shields, merely tapping helplessly against helmets or shoulder plates. Some unfortunate souls were pierced in the eyes or grazed on the cheeks. At the end of the alley, Tywin watched as several small crossbows were readied. His voice harsh as he commanded, "Fire, my lord. Every fallen warrior shall have his family provided for life. Fire." With a roar, the stout crossbow bolts soared towards the struggling factions, tearing through armor and flesh, skewering Lannister soldiers like kebabs. Barto naturally witnessed this frenzied scene. Seeing the enemy readying their bows and arrows once more, Barto shouted for a retreat, but the crowded throng was not easily swayed from their course, especially with Barto positioned at the forefront. "Advance!" Noan's roar echoed like thunder, led by the Thorns. As a portion of the group continued towards the stone garden to join forces with Bardo, while another segment circumvented the blocked tunnel beneath the golden corridor. Fortunately, Bardo had already dispatched men to clear the passage, and Geode found himself among them. Bardo stood firm at the forefront, drawing Tywin's attention, while Geode, accompanied by a small contingent, engaged in what the Ironborn had always excelled at. Huhu, in a joyous demeanor, bounded forward, arriving at his favorite segment of the encounter. The Lannister soldiers, in a flurry, scrambled to adjust their crossbows, yet the Ironborn granted them no respite. The thrown axes disrupted their movements, and Huhu brutally toppled the nearest crossbow. Tywin orchestrated the defense, with shield bearers swiftly forming a circular formation, while spears protruded like quills from the gaps in the shields, repelling any would-be visitors. The stalemate in the alley had been shattered, as the crossbow bolts from behind eroded the warriors' resolve, causing them to abandon their shields in panic. The fleeing men dared not assault their lord's circular formation nor charge at the evidently formidable Huhu, and thus, they cast aside their weapons and knelt in surrender. Should the Lannisters triumph, the retribution they would face was of little concern. Their sole desire was to preserve their lives. Huhu yearned to press on, its armor thick enough to instill confidence in the face of death's looming threat. Yet, no one lacked such assurance. Observing the spiked creature, he decisively called a halt to the eager Huhu. "Lord Tywin, surrender, and I assure you that no harm shall befall your family." The serpent's promise was but a slow-acting poison. "Octopus, your castle has succumbed. Needless sacrifice is not the act of the wise, as your son has informed me. My son is in King's Landing. He is a member of the King's Guard. Tyrion, come and persuade your father. Upon hearing Noan's words, Tywin's eyes widened in disbelief. Father, I am sorry. They have captured Aunt Donna and the children. Coward, disgrace. Tywin's furious outburst reverberated through the nameless square where Noan stood. Tyrion refrained from further comment. Yet Tywin's wrath persisted, cursing his son with the most venomous language, causing the imp, typically adorned with a cynical grin, to lower his disproportionately large head. At last, silence enveloped the square. The shield wall was lowered, and the dense formation of troops parted to create an opening. Tywin limped out, having been injured when an Ironborn severed his warhorse's unarmored ankle with an axe. The fallen steed did not crush the Duke, but merely twisted his left foot, marking the sole injury he sustained in the battle. Even this castle, which stood resilient during the reign of the Dragon King, remains unyielding. Octopus. For Lord Loren Lannister made the right choice, Old Lion. Indeed, it is all about choices. I have made many, each a reflection of my life. I am Noan Greyjoy. I have long anticipated this meeting with you. I have lost my sons, one drowned within the treacherous dream spun by a wicked dragon, while I mourn the other from the moment he drew breath, deeming him dead. You have triumphed, Squid. Tywin bellowed, abruptly concluding the conversation. He would not bow in submission. The aged lion stood tall, removing his helmet and casting a cold glance at his dwarf son before turning to Norn, arms wide open. Come, he softly hummed. Norn unstrung the long bow at his side, drawing the string taut, and the swift arrow sword with precision embedding itself into Tywin's skull. His towering form collapsed backward. The once feared lion of the West now fallen, a hero who had salvaged his family from the hands of his father, Duke Tydos. He had two sons, one strikingly handsome and skilled in combat, yet bound as a king's guard, thus losing his rightful claim to the family legacy. The other, a deformed and unsightly dwarf, yet astute in his own right. Perhaps he could reclaim his ancestral castle through his cunning, much like his ancestor, the clever Lon. But that was a prospect for another day. Tywin Lannister had roused the lion, and with his demise, the lion would once more return to slumber. The castle, renowned for its invincibility, would lower the banner that had flown for millennia, akin to the Casterlys relinquishing their own, albeit with a far less tranquil transition. Norn had heard various tales of the Lannisters, yet the version he believed most fervently was that there existed no true Casterly family. Rather, the Lord of Casterly Rock had but one daughter, and Lon had won her heart, just as Joffrey Lannister had captured the affections of the sole daughter of Jaron Lannister. Perhaps the passage of a millennium had fortified the Lannisters sufficiently, causing Joffrey to adopt their surname. Otherwise, Casterly Rock would today bear the name of Lon rather than Lannister. And history might have recorded a clever Joffrey instead. No, Tyrion had never held affection for his father. He merely sought his approval, a chance now irrevocably lost. With Tywin's passing, the armed forces within the castle laid down their arms, and under Norn's command, rampant pillaging was strictly prohibited. Tyrion removed all the gold from the city, whether gold dragons or gilded artifacts, and Norn distributed them in the grand square of the main keep. Enough to quell the ire of the majority. He proclaimed that this would henceforth be the realm of the Ironborn, not a target for plunder, urging them to safeguard their possessions. As Balon crowned during the reign of Talar stated, the ancient path had long abandoned the Ironborn. Whether under the rule of Hall or the conquest of the Dragon King, the Ironborn had transformed, with the pursuit of gold now the aspiration of all. The greatest treasure unearthed, however, was 2 dark iron ingots. According to Tyrion, the Lannister family had long sought to reclaim their ancestral sword, Bright Roar, for which his uncle, Kevan Lannister, had ventured to sea, yet had not returned. The 2 iron ingots represent the entirety of Valyrian steel amassed by House Lannister since they were lost by the former king of Casterly Rock, Tommen II, prior to the conquest of Aegon. Now, they have fallen into the possession of Noan. However, their quantity is insufficient. They are barely adequate for crafting a hand-and-a-half sword. Only enough to forge a longer dagger or a short sword, while Dawn is a great sword, which is why it has been relegated to obscurity in Casterly Rock. These ingots are remarkably light, with exceptional hardness and resilience. Even when struck by Dunk's sword, Blackfire, they only sustain faint white scratches that quickly vanish, as if they possess a self-repairing quality. This marks the first encounter with such legendary magical metal for Noan in many years. As he intends to forge a battle axe for himself, he knows there exists a certain place where Valyrian steel is plentiful after all. They are extravagant enough to fashion necklaces from it. Noan hopes that sufficient ingots remain there. The battle axe, previously reclaimed by Kevan from Casterly Rock, now rests in the Hall of Heroes, a testament to Kevan's valiant demise, though Noan is uncertain where this honor lies. However, Noan now feels increasingly uncomfortable wielding this double-headed axe. The sound it produces when swung no longer resonates as it once did. Humming softly, he observes the iron axe being waved occasionally on the balcony, while casting moist glances at its owner, leading him to shake his head and seek out the elderly. Limping white. With Tyrion's assistance, Casterly Rock was swiftly taken over, and now he accompanies None as they survey several key areas within the castle, the forge, and the mint. I expected this place to be more resplendent, None remarked. But it does indeed produce some splendid items, my lord, Tyrion replied, his enthusiasm waning. This once jovial dwarf had not been smiling much lately. It does not appear to be frequently utilized. Today, None rode upon a magnificent white stallion, pristine and unblemished. Reputed to be one of Tywin's steeds, towering even when ridden in the shadow of the mountain. Casterly Rock does not mind daily, nor does it operate the forge every day, my lord. Indeed, but the need arises now. I must find tasks for the captives. After a moment's contemplation, None added, not within the city, but outside. I will seal all the mining tunnels, leaving only the routes to the port and shipyard. Your wisdom is commendable, my lord. Following the inspection of several other significant structures in the city, including stables and barracks, None and his accompanying leaders returned to the throne hall adorned with gold and gems to discuss the forthcoming itinerary. Chapter 20. The funeral. The people of Lannisport were aware that they had welcomed a new ruler. Aside from the affluent merchants and nobility, they posed little threat to the common folk. The old edicts continued to be enforced, with the only notable change being the patrol soldiers in the city, who had become somewhat more intimidating. The Ironborn have achieved a glory that their ancestors could never attain. Those who remain unsatisfied dare not openly oppose the rising sons of the Salt Wives, while the contented among them beam with delight. Sacrifices among the Ironborn are not uncommon. Even in the most peaceful years of the Seven Kingdoms, they would venture out to sea to plunder due to scarce resources. The funerals of their lords would be accompanied by a longship, guiding them to the watery palace, where they would continue as captains under the dominion of the drowned god. Ordinary Ironborn, under certain conditions, might receive a small sailboat, perhaps to continue serving their former leaders, or to row the grand vessel of the drowned god that bears the watery palace. A vessel so immense that its end cannot be seen, accompanied by the longships of either the drowned or the lords. This would surely form an endless fleet. Yet, on the fierce battlefield, captains often treat their deceased sailors with indifference, casting them into the sea and allowing the drowned to sing a dirge or lament as a final farewell. Some miserly captains would even deny them armor and weapons, sending them off in nothing but simple linen garments to the palace of the drowned god. However, today, Norn arranged for 2 grand ships, unlike any seen before. To honor the fallen Ironborn from the Battle of Lannister, 2 of the flagship vessels from the Golden Fleet of Lannister. He instructed the women of the city to cleanse the bodies of these warriors and to stitch together severed limbs, if they could be found. Regardless of whether they were the original limbs, at least Norn ensured that they were reattached, for having something is better than having nothing, is it not? Norn did not allow them to be laid to rest in nakedness or mere linen. Instead, he provided them with polished armor and weaponry stripped from captives as their burial attire. This incited a longing in many living Ironborn to join their fallen kin in eternal rest. Norn promised that every Ironborn who fought alongside him would receive a longship to the watery palace, which quelled their desires. Yet, some severely disabled Ironborn, unwilling to miss this opportunity, insisted on seeing the drowned god during this funeral, and Norn acquiesced. They ultimately perished in duels. In the early morning, a hazy mist lingered over the bay, while fish, well fed over the past 2 days, swam languidly near the port, regrettably meeting harpoons instead of offerings. At dawn, the port of Lannisport was cleared, with the still frightened populace unaware of what was to come, huddling along the embankment to observe. Each Ironborn leader and captain rode on horseback, following the swaying behind of their mounts towards the port. Curious eyes peered through the homes lining the long street, only to be swiftly embraced by fearful parents who covered their eyes and knelt trembling. Moments later, the adults, sensing that nothing untoward was occurring, looked up in confusion and fear, only to discover that the horsemen were nearly vanishing at the end of the avenue. The bold, children and fearless elders hesitantly followed the procession to the port, where the horsemen halted at the protruding dock, facing 2 grand ships, solitary, and turned away from the harbor. The sails of the grand vessel have been raised, while the tightly bound ropes ensnare 2 colossal beasts yearning to break free, eager to set sail with their crew. The crew, already aboard, is clad in armor, wielding long swords or battle axes, with round shields protecting their chests. Each individual bears a hand axe at their side, and a flask of ale rests against their cheek. As they ascend to the elevated platform beneath the mighty ship, a potent scent of grease fills the air, heralding the arrival of iron and fire, where iron is reborn from the sea, seizing all with its might. only to ultimately return to the embrace of the ocean through the flames. Noen steps onto the pre-constructed platform, addressing the Lord and the Ironborn sailors present to witness. Alongside the free folk and former pirates under his command, the departed do not perish, they shall rise again, and with even greater fervor. Drawing a deep breath, Noen bellows the Ironborn's creed. Those gathered below, whether Ironborn, free folk, or other nations joining Noen's fleet, echo his declaration. The people of the verdant lands mistakenly believe the Ironborn lack honor. They are mistaken. As I often say, a harsh land breeds harsh people. Our honor lies in perseverance, in striving to endure. With our hands, we earn jewelry for our women and land for our children, hoping future generations shall not endure the same plight we have, living upon the barren salt flats. And that, indeed, is our honor. Yes, Noen's pause incites a chorus of agreement from all. The Ironborn do not shy away from cunning and schemes, even taking pride in them. Yet we also uphold tradition, never drawing our blades against the subdued. We honor warriors, personally burying them with our battle axes. The essence of the Ironborn is forged through labor, not inheritance. Even the greatest Iron King must lead the charge into battle. Indeed, Noen nods in acknowledgement to the fervent voices. Generations of Ironborn have traversed the seas, returning lands, gold, and women to the archipelago. The formidable Halwanhor conquered the entire riverlands. And Halp continued his legacy until the dreamer Helrun built his cherished castle, only to meet his end within its walls, thus ceasing the Ironborn's conquests. Many among the Ironborn below, recalling that history, display expressions of longing and regret. Today, we gather our fleet once more to complete the unfinished endeavors of our forebears. The victories Noen has achieved in recent days, coupled with the generous gold distributed yesterday, have finally borne fruit, prompting all, including Island, to chant Noen's name. The true Ironborn, they exclaim. Noen raises his arm slightly, silencing the cheers below, and resumes his address. This is not the end, but the beginning. Here we shall thrive and bury our own. Unlike Hal, who only concerned himself with his kingdom and trivial castle, we shall become the true guardians of this land. Just as we safeguard the archipelago, for we shall claim the entirety of the 7 kingdoms. Awoo. Iron King, Iron King, Iron King, Iron King. It is unknown who first uttered this title, but Noen's objective has been met. He cast a glance at Elin and the prominent lords standing in the front row, their expressions mirroring the excitement of the crowd. The Driftwood crown shall eventually belong to Noen, and he shall not be content with merely one crown. The urgency lies with Baron, for Noen shall not return to Old Wyk Island, and Baron cannot afford to launch an attack on him over a single speech. Instead, he will eagerly seek to achieve merit, and Noen can anticipate his point of departure, Seagrove City, driven by the ancient path spoken of by Baron, in pursuit of what he dreams to restore, the so-called glory of Hall. As Noen stated, no matter how great the Iron King, he must personally face the battlefield. May Baron still possess the valor of his youth. The departed do not perish. Awoo. The departed shall rise again, their vigor even more fierce. The speech commenced amidst roars and concluded in a similar tumult. At this moment, 2 smaller sail-powered warships gradually set forth. As the crew employed iron hooks to secure 2 grand vessels bearing the oarsmen of the drowned god, gently towing them away from the harbor, the Iron Folk began to sing funeral dirges. The ships skimmed across the tumultuous waves, from barren peaks to verdant lands, heralding a new beginning. Conquest fills me with honor. Ravens soar, carrying messages. Battle hymns and legends shall be woven by my hand. Shields and battle axes have been polished. We are reborn in the sea. We are interred in the sea. Iron and fire, taken away, we shall ultimately reunite, adorned with blood and glory in the flowing palace. Gradually, the great ship laden with Iron Folk reached a safe distance. The tugging sail-powered warships veered to the sides, and the grand vessels, propelled by the wind, had their sails billow like the capes of charging warriors. 2 bright rockets shot forth from the small vessels, tracing bright red arcs through the still lingering mist. Flames began to spread from the deck, first igniting the sails, then consuming the entire hull. The grand ship, which had entered the thick fog, seemed poised to vanish. Yet the blazing fire dispelled the mist, allowing those on shore to behold its fiery glow. The hull, ablaze and reaching towards the sea, emitted a crackling sound as water battled fire, stirring new mists, while the continuing flames once more dispersed them, the towering mast twisting and collapsing in the inferno. The booming sounds erupted within the fireball, reminiscent of the clash of armies on the battlefield, while splintered wood, occasionally flung by the intense heat, danced like a partner, bestowing blessings upon the warrior's voyage. As the vessel gradually sank and the flames extinguished, the sun by the seaside finally rose majestically, dispersing the morning mist and illuminating the traces left by the ship's passage in a vivid crimson hue. The undulating waves carried dark fragments, reminiscent of a banquet hall awaiting tidying after a raucous feast. The funeral had concluded, and the Ironborn departed the port in small groups. The grand yet unpretentious ceremony stirred emotions within each soul present. The sacrifices made were intertwined with the essence of the Ironborn's existence. They did not grieve excessively, especially since their comrades and brethren had received the highest honors. The crowd refrained from disturbing the fleet commander still standing at the port, instinctively granting him the space he required. Cyriliana and Bardis observed the eldest son standing in the morning light. Bardis was eager to speak, but Cyriliana restrained him. Her impetuous son was already brimming with excitement. She could anticipate his words, but felt it was not the right moment. She patted Bardis's hand and approached None alone. "My son, Baron will be displeased. Then he must achieve merit. Shall we return to Bloodstone Isle?" "I will return, but Bardis will remain, as will you, mother. I miss the children. They will thrive in a secure future. I must strive for it. I have always believed in you, and I have never disappointed you. I merely wish for everyone's safety, my child. Do you remember, mother, the purpose of your voyage? It led you into captivity, and granted me invaluable wealth. I shall not await fate's design." Cyriliana fell silent, reflecting that perhaps she should not have shared such tales with None in his youth. It seemed to have become a lifelong burden for her son. "Soon there will be no safe haven left. Mother, have you been having those nightmares again?" As before, None did not respond directly to his mother, and Cyriliana never pressed for answers. Without dragons, the Seven Kingdoms can accomplish nothing. If the turmoil of the Seven Kingdoms is what fate has ordained, then I shall be the one to incite it, and I shall also bring it to an end. None ceased speaking, gazing at the sun as it ascended, casting his thoughts far beyond. Chapter 21 Baron, what is this? Can I do it too? Dominion and conquest are two entirely distinct concepts, and None was acutely aware of this. He had contemplated relocating Bloodstone Isle to Kaijin City, but such a notion was impractical. None was never a military genius. His legendary victories stem from one singular advantage: intelligence. With timely information, coupled with the robust physique bestowed upon him by his mother, Cyriliana, he frequently navigated through enemy lines clad in heavy armor, achieving remarkable feats. Of course, a touch of audacity was also crucial. Even with his absolute advantage in intelligence, None found himself unable to confront the dual threats of land and sea simultaneously. It is foreseeable that the lords of the Westerlands will inevitably unite. However, thanks to Tywin's reforms, there are few influential families left in this land apart from the Lannisters. The scattered coalition forces are merely there to observe the spectacle, and Bardis can easily take the initiative. The most formidable challenge lies with the king. Should he venture into the Westerlands, he would amass a formidable army, as the lords here are not impoverished. Although the mountainous terrain does not support a large population, the quality of their equipment could arm the king's forces to the teeth. To effectively restrain the king and his army, Norn must return south to Bloodstone Island, ensuring that the fleet from the eastern shores cannot reinforce the western front. As for the naval power of the Westerlands, aside from the Falmans of Fairy Island, there are no other formidable maritime families. Even the Falmans are not what they once were. Tywin has unified the Westerlands, compelling them to speak with one voice, but in doing so, he has also broken the spines of his vassals. Moreover, the Lannisters' defeat has granted these subdued vassals an opportunity, particularly the formidable Bayfort family, who once contended for the throne with Casterly Rock. They are likely to be elated by this turn of events. The western coast is left with the fleet of the Reach, while the other two realms adjacent to the west are less impressive. The Riverlands, apart from Seaguard, lack any exceptional ports, and to guard against the Iron Islands, its walls are far more resilient than its fleet. The north is a frozen expanse, since the Burned Man. The north, aside from the Manderley family in White Harbor on the eastern shore, boasts no noteworthy fleet on the western front. The Reach's Redwine fleet is indeed powerful, but even if Victarion cannot utterly defeat them this time, Norn is confident that Lord Paxter will not extend his full support to the Westerlands, as he is fundamentally a businessman. Due to the necessity of Bardis defending Casterly Rock, Norn must retain sufficient iron and his trusted troops, which leaves his warriors somewhat stretched. Ultimately, Norn decides to take the Lannister captives with him, transforming them into his soldiers. Those who have undergone military training and seen the ravages of war remain a threat if left within the city and port. Mining can easily recruit peasants and farmers from the lands of Casterly Rock, as long as sufficient incentives are offered. The farmers and common folk will not care whether a lion or an octopus reigns above them, for their primary concern is their daily sustenance, a truth that holds in any world. With Cyriliana present, there is no need to worry about potential raids. As long as she is well fed and cared for, she can patrol the skies throughout the night. Bardis, I leave this in your capable hands. Rest assured, brother, I will heed the counsel of Mother and Uncle Tristan. And as for Adric, he is more than just a warrior. I understand. I will entrust the defense of Lannisport entirely to him. Do not be stingy with resources. We are guarding a veritable gold mine. Ha ha ha. I know, brother. If Bloodstone Island proves insufficiently secure, I shall send the children over. As for Fairy Island, it suffices to vanquish his fleet. Even mere verbal fealty will suffice. Tyrion retains his utility, though his usefulness will inevitably wane. As for the other Lannisters, I shall take them away, for leaving them in the city is a nuisance. I can manage Moiraine Swift, Cornfield can be swayed. Noon patted his younger brother on the shoulder, preparing to embark. He conveyed numerous instructions to Cerelia and Bardas, taking with him a portion of the Golden Fleet while leaving behind a segment of the Iron Islands and his narrow sea vessels. The ships he left were somewhat slower yet larger, while he took with him the swift vessels. It is anticipated that the Lords of the Seven Kingdoms will soon receive news of Casterly Rock as change of hands. For time is ever the most critical element in warfare. As he journeyed southward, Noon aimed not only to rendezvous with the Iron Fleet but also to eradicate any potential threats lingering along the western coast. As Noon had surmised, the various earls of the West had indeed received word of their liege's assault, though it was curious that the news emerged from Oxford town, while Casterly Rock remained silent. With the proliferation of rumors, the Earl of Feastfire sent his cousin and heir, Flairplest, to visit Lannisport, only to be detained at the port by the Ironborn, with a lone small vessel escaping upon sensing the danger. Thus, the West was assured of Casterly Rock's attack, yet it was peculiar that Tywin had not issued any word, with the news instead originating from Oxford town and Feastfire. At this juncture, none were aware of Tywin's demise. The first to receive this intelligence was the king of the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy. The old lion is dead. Balon gazed in astonishment at Yoren, who conveyed the news, his jaw agape with shock. So it was written in the missive from Yoren. Yoren had undergone a remarkable transformation. His right hand had been replaced by a prosthetic, his entire palm severed, supplanted by a sharp curved blade. His once flowing locks had been cropped into a tidy shortcut, though he had a penchant for drink. It was unlikely he would utter any inebriated remarks during such pivotal military revelations. Yoren's voice remained calm, devoid of discernible emotion. Rather, it bore an air of irreverence. I once believed that lion to be formidable, elevated by the folk of the Green Lands. It now appears that the impregnable Casterly Rock is but a jest. Balon's astonishment flared and faded swiftly, replaced by exhilaration and delight. Observing Balon's enthusiasm, Yoren smiled, bringing forth another matter of interest. There are further intriguing developments, brother. What? Noon Greyjoy has arranged for 2 300-oar galleons to convey the slain Ironborn to the Hall of Flowing Waters. Oh, that is their rightful glory, for they have breached Casterly Rock. The Ironborn raised their voices in tribute to the Iron King at the funeral, directing their fervor towards Euron Greyjoy. This revelation evidently left Balon momentarily stunned. He was uncertain of Euron's assertions as he reached for the note brought back by the Raven. There is but one king of the Iron Islands, the supreme ruler of the archipelago, who has been crowned in the presence of the Grey King. And that is my father. Roderick Greyjoy and Meryn Greyjoy were already prepared to take up arms, having convened in the hall of the Seastone Chair for this impromptu meeting. Upon hearing the news, Roderick was filled with fury. As Balon's eldest son and heir, Euron's threat to Balon's position naturally undermined his own. Father, we must punish this traitor. Balon cast a glance at his son but remained silent, opting instead to observe Euron's response. After all, he had yet to be crowned in the hall of the Grey King and had not publicly claimed the throne. He seeks to provoke me, to provoke his king. Thus, we must teach him a lesson. Roderick continued to shout. The Ironborn had countless kings, the kings of the rock and the kings of salt. Yet there was only one supreme ruler. Having been crowned, I shall not concern myself with the ambitions of lesser kings. Must every supreme ruler throughout history slay the captains who dare challenge them? Balon revered the old ways, which dictated that Ironborn should not slaughter one another, primarily because the Ironborn relied on naval strength, and every captain aboard his ship must possess absolute authority. Euron Greyiron once slaughtered all his rivals at the Kingsmoot, brother, and thus, the Greyiron line was extinguished. Euron is a true Greyjoy, even if he is the son of a salt wife. If he wishes to challenge my throne, I shall defeat him upon the seas, not through treachery. He has gained Casterly Rock, while I shall claim all of the riverlands. Balon was resolute, deciding to set sail personally upon his fleet's return, bringing back not only the tidings of Casterly Rock's fall but also Euron's speech. Balon concurred with Euron's assertion that every Iron King must be present in battle. At least he has not broken his promise, declared Euron, whose ship was laden with gold. After hearing Balon's impassioned address, Euron remarked, He should surrender all of Casterly Rock, rather than bestow it upon his brother. Does he think he can grant lands? That is the prerogative of a king. Roderick remained indignant. Euron had no desire to dwell on the disputes of Pike, nor did he wish to, unless Balon was truly a fool. Otherwise, he would not incite internal conflict at this juncture. His fleet continued to navigate the open seas, avoiding the coastal lands, even with the favorable winds. The great oars of the ships were vigorously propelling them forward at an impressive speed towards the riverlands. Euron had no intention of returning to Pike. He enjoyed the company of Balto, who, though tempestuous, was a genuinely warm-hearted individual. Since childhood, Euron had maintained a close bond with Balto and Corran, despite his age being more akin to Euron's. Among his brothers, the one he loathed the most was Eulon, the one he obeyed the most was Balon. The one he felt closest to was Victarion, and the one he loved the most was Urrigan. He had long blamed himself for Urrigan's demise, leading him to a life of excessive drinking, though it was not entirely his fault. Bardas always reminded him of his deceased brother, although they bore no resemblance. They shared a love for laughter and a cheerful disposition. As Wyk Island drew nearer, Euron took a sip of the golden wine he had brought from Casterly Rock, his gaze becoming somewhat hazy. He preferred stronger spirits, yet golden wine was more expensive and befitting of his current station. Chapter 22. King's Landing. It is said that farmers find it difficult to conceive of a king's life. They might imagine a monarch tilling the soil with a golden hoe or dining from a golden bowl. The former is undoubtedly absurd, as a king does not need to cultivate the land, while the latter may hold some truth, for a king is hardly a pauper. However, King Robert Baratheon is an exception. The citizens of King's Landing, the farmers beyond the city, and indeed the entire realm, from nobles to commoners, are well acquainted with the nature of Robert's life. True to his moniker, the Pleasure King, he is either indulging in the company of courtesans or en route to do so, though he also partakes in hunting, often accompanied by his paramours. Ah, detestable. Do you enjoy this, my queen? He jested. You are magnificent, my king. When Prime Minister Jon Arryn's servant arrived at the door of the king's chambers, these were the sounds he heard, and it was certain that they did not originate from the queen. At that moment, Ser Jaime Lannister stood guard at the king's door. It was unclear what amusement compelled the king to have this knight serve as a sentinel while entertaining in the Red Keep. Perhaps it was due to both him and the queen sharing the same surname. As the servant mused, Ser Jaime wore a stoic expression, devoid of mirth, and cast a cold gaze at the uninvited guest. The king is otherwise occupied, he stated. I believe I can hear that, sire, the servant retorted. Then you ought to return to your nest. That will not do. The prime minister requires the king's presence. Ser Andorois, hailing from the prominent Royce family of Runestone, was a notable figure in the Vale, unfazed by Ser Jaime Lannister's threat. He had recently arrived in King's Landing to garner experience as the eldest son and heir of Runestone, serving as a squire and guard for the prime minister. However, Andorois had begun to grow weary of the foul stench of King's Landing. As the scion of a great noble house, he was tall, strong, and skilled in combat, yet still young, with many places yet to explore. He had never intended to remain in King's Landing for a lifetime. Perhaps it was time to venture elsewhere, he contemplated. There were many who needed the king, yet few whom the king required. The prime minister needed the king, just as the king needed the prime minister. I believe I have expressed myself quite clearly, young bronze lad. I have yet to test whether your runes truly safeguard you from harm. Ser Jaime Lannister's mood was rather foul. He had been irritable of late, and the sight of the smiling bronze boy across from him only exacerbated his vexation. He was disinclined to engage in any form of pretense with anyone, save for the king, the queen, perhaps the prince, and maybe even his sworn brothers. Upon reflection, that was quite a number of individuals, and Jaime snorted derisively to himself. Observing Jaime Lannister, who had already grasped the hilt of his sword, Andorois felt a sense of confusion. He was unsure of where he had provoked him. Yet confronting the king's guard outside the king's chamber was certainly not a prudent course of action. With one hand resting on his sword, he spoke. I do not wish to offend, sir. Your duty is to inform the king, not to obstruct his guests. My duty is to protect the king and to remove those who disturb his leisure. As he regarded the unyielding Lannister, Andorois' smile vanished, his grip tightening around the hilt at his waist, fixing a cold stare upon his adversary. The red-armored guards, noticing Andorois' movement, similarly grasped their sword sheaths. And just as the conflict seemed poised to erupt, those within the chamber appeared to sense the tension. The king's thunderous voice broke the silence. Seven hells. Must it be now? Who is outside? Jaime Lannister released his grip, slightly ajar the door, allowing the sound to filter through clearly without revealing the king's presence within. Lord Alan's servant, your majesty. Let him enter. Jaime Lannister maintained his icy demeanor as he elbowed the door open, not casting a glance inside. Returning instead to his previous position, resembling a statue, the king, clad in a loose silk nightgown that exposed his chest, sat boldly upon the edge of the bed. His dense body hair lent him a wild appearance, his sturdy legs resting upon the richly woven carpet. A strikingly alluring woman lounged languidly at the king's thigh, her head propped on one hand, her emerald-like eyes watching Andoroyus with a playful curiosity. "Your Majesty, I sincerely apologize for intruding upon your leisure, but I must interrupt you." Andoroyus placed his hand over his heart. "What does the hand of my king wish from me?" "Lord Euron requests your presence at the royal council." "Why must I attend?" "Let the prime minister handle it. That is his duty." "I fear that will not suffice, your Majesty. I know little, but it concerns war." Andoroyus was certain he saw a glimmer in the king's eyes, akin to a child who had finally discovered a coveted toy, eager to engage with it immediately. "War?" "Yes, your Majesty, that is precisely why your presence is required. Lena, fetch my garments." Subsequently, Andoroyus exited the chamber, and the king, swift in his movements, exhibited a slight portliness. Nevertheless, his regal presence remained unmistakable. Within the throne room, the king's ministers sat upright, awaiting his arrival. The Duke of Eagle's Nest, the guardian of the Eastern Realm, and the king's hand furrowed his brow as he perused a letter, having read its concise contents repeatedly, unable to comprehend why it originated from Fire Feast City. "John, what transpired? Speak swiftly." The voice of King Robert echoed before his physical presence graced the throne room, accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps and the clanking of armor. Jon Arryn, the current hand of the king, cast a furrowed glance at the ceiling, feeling as though his adopted son's bellow had dislodged the dust above. With a creak, the king, eschewing any attendance, forcefully pushed open the door to the assembly of his ministers. Hand resting upon his long sword, he stormed in with fervor. Had he not been the king, one might have mistaken him for a troublemaker from King's Landing. Upon the king's arrival, the members of the council rose and placed their hands upon their chests in salute. Robert, ever weary of such formalities, merely nodded before plopping down into his seat, eager to inquire once more, "Pray, tell me, what has transpired?" "Your Majesty, you ought to observe decorum." The hand, aware of the futility of his admonition, felt compelled to speak, as it was his duty, akin to the family motto that exalted honor. "Seven hells, old John, spare me the pleasantries and speak." The hand wished to add further remarks, yet ultimately fell silent, recognizing the urgency of the matter at hand, though he deemed advising the king equally significant. "News has arrived from Fire Feast City, your Majesty. Lannisport has been attacked." The hand stated matter-of-factly. This succinct declaration left the accompanying guard, Jaime Lannister, momentarily stunned. For that was his family's stronghold. Wait, should it not be Casterly Rock? Why Fire Feast City? The king, however, was not concerned for his father-in-law, knowing well that the Lannisters possessed both wealth and manpower. "It remains unclear, your Majesty. Fire Feast City claims they received the tidings from Oxford Town. Perhaps the Old Lion has already resolved the issue and requires no assistance from us." Jaime Lannister cast a sidelong glance at Stannis Baratheon, the kingdom's master of ships, a man as stubborn as he was unyielding. The Lannisters were not blessed with many allies within the council, yet Stannis was correct. The Lannisters could fend for themselves without external aid. "That may not be the case, my lord. Although the news from Fire Feast City is difficult to believe. The Earl's heir, Flare Plaister, has been captured at Lannisport." The Raven dispatch to Casterly Rock bore no return message, suggesting that something untoward has occurred there. The speaker is the esteemed Maester of Pycelle, whose tone bears the echoes of the grave. He is advanced in years, with hair as white as snow, and his gait is unsteady, leading King Robert to believe he could perish at any moment. Yet there are no plans to rid the realm of this remnant of the dragon. What unexpected turn could there be? Hasn't the Lannisters always proudly proclaimed that Casterly Rock is impregnable? Duke Lancel Lannister is also not fond of the Lannisters, as their crimson armor is ubiquitous in the court. Regardless, the king's vassals have been attacked, and the kingdom cannot afford to turn a blind eye. The prime minister's diligence is acknowledged. He is ever concerned for the king's welfare. Who has assaulted Casterly Rock? The king shows little interest in such matters. His sole concern is whether there is a war to be fought. Who else could it be but the Ironborn? Stannis' words caused the king to frown deeply. Could he not speak more decorously? When addressing the king, he should, like others, interject a respectful "Your Grace" at any point in his discourse. It remains uncertain. No banners were seen atop the walls of Dragonstone, not even the golden lion of the Lannisters, "Your Grace." This is quite satisfactory, the king mused, glancing at his loyal prime minister and his vexatious younger brother. At that moment, a saccharine voice interjected. It can be surmised that it is indeed the Ironborn. "For our Lord of Bloodstone, The Earl recently led his fleet northward, Your Grace, remarked Master of Whisperers Varys, casting a glance at the newly appointed Minister of Justice. Lancel Lannister. What are we waiting for? Stannis is preparing a fleet to seize Bloodstone. It is unlikely to be so straightforward, Your Grace. We cannot hastily initiate hostilities, especially since Casterly Rock has yet to respond. Then let us write immediately to inquire, and to Pike as well. Your will, Your Grace. The Prime Minister continued. Regardless of the veracity of the reports, we must prepare for war. It is essential to summon the fleet. I will arrange for the royal fleet to assemble at the harbor. Stannis, in his capacity as the Admiral of the Navy, acquiesced to the Prime Minister's request and continued. Historically, the nearest landing point to the Iron Islands has been the coastal city of the Riverlands. If the Ironborn fleet indeed attacked Lannisport, their next target must surely be the coastal city. Maester, you are tasked with notifying Lord Jason Mallister to be on guard. Very well, my Lord Prime Minister. What concern is this of mine? I thought we were to strike immediately. King Robert was displeased. He longed for the battlefield and those days of hardship. Your Grace. I must, in the name of the king, inform the coastal nobles to prepare for a potential Ironborn assault. By the seven hells, you can decide this matter yourself. Must I make a trip for it? This is the authority of the Wardens of the Realm, Your Grace. Very well, I bestow upon you, Jon Arryn. This authority. Your Grace, you are of age. This title is yours alone to hold. I implore you to retract that statement. It is power, Jon. Power, and not merely a title. King Robert was somewhat irked by his Prime Minister, having anticipated the forthcoming words of his advisor. Power is likewise, Your Grace, he interjected, raising a hand to interrupt the Prime Minister's lengthy discourse. He placed immense trust in Lord Jon Arryn, his hand of the king and royal Prime Minister, more than anyone else. Yet, at times, the Prime Minister's incessant rhetoric was akin to the monotonous recitations of the monks in the church, causing him considerable vexation. In the name of the King of the Undals, the Roiner, and the First Men, the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, I hereby grant the Council full authority to address this matter. Reporting will be Lord Jon Arryn, Duke of the Eyrie, Guardian of the Vale, Protector of the Eastern Marches, Hand of the King, and Prime Minister of the realm. So be it. The esteemed members of the council rose in unison, bowing in deference to the king. However, King Robert paid little heed to their formalities. Having delivered his decree, he hastily departed, as if a pressing matter awaited his attention. King Robert harbored a disdain for that place, for its inhabitants and the atmosphere, not to mention the uncomfortable iron chair beside him, though he excluded his Prime Minister and his youthful brother, Renly, from his disdain.